Chapter 2157, Killing Lin Xian. In Ling Han's hands, the source powers of heaven and earth displayed their mysterious power one after another, moving to suppress Lin Xian. The regulation of slaughter allowed Ling Han to be anywhere and everywhere, while the regulations of time allowed him to create disorder in the past, present, and future to a limited extent. The regulations of lightning was overbearing and ferocious, while the regulation of slaughter meant being indestructible. Channeling the regulations of the five elements in turn, it was like he was creating a new heaven and earth. Lin Xian was indeed very strong. In the first place, he was a monarch tier, and now that he had unlocked the seal of the power of darkness, he was strong to the point of matching a super monarch tier like Wenren. Unfortunately, his opponent was a monarch of monarchs that was rare to come by even in several epochs, a true great monarch. Thus, he could only be beaten down on. Very soon, he was bleeding all over, and the bizarre thing was the fact that after he had unleashed the power of darkness, his blood had also become inky black. He held on with much difficulty. He was filled with longing for life, and had absolutely no wish to die here. And this really caused him to burst out with greater battle power. Furthermore, he had also activated a kind of secret technique, allowing his injuries to rapidly heal in a short period of time, no matter what injuries he had sustained, and it was as if he was completely unaffected. Ling Han did not believe that his recovery ability could be maintained at such a powerful level, but rather that the other party would have to pay a hefty price for it. However, Lin Xian was indeed capable of continuously healing his injuries at present. Though his physique was not invincible, added with this kind of recovery ability, it was close to invincible. You cannot kill me. I have the protection of the power of the deity, and even the heavens here cannot kill me. Lin Xian laughed loudly. His confidence had recovered instantly. Even if his battle prowess was no match for Ling Han's, so what? He cultivated the power of darkness, and its level was higher than the celestial realms. In the end, his accomplishments would also be superior to Ling Han's. Ling Han shook his head, and muttered, "Ignorance." An indescribably terrifying power surged out from his body. He couldn't bother himself to continue fighting Lin Xian. Thus, he used the great clash of source powers. Suddenly, a nervous expression came over Lin Xian's face. He had already sustained loss from this move once. If it were not for the fact that the spiritual mountain celestial king had laid out a celestial technique on him, he would have long since died. Perhaps he would also be creating history, and that history would be that he would be the first immortal palace tier that died in the hands of a dividing soul tier in a head-on clash. But when he thought back to his present recovery ability, wounds would probably be recovered just as they appeared, so what was the use of a powerful attack? He was fearless. Moreover, he couldn't flee even if he wanted to. In front of Ling Han, who had grasped both the source power of space and time, if he could really manage to flee, wouldn't it be an insult to these two great source powers of heaven and earth? Boom, the great clash of source powers exploded, and the five elements supported and subdued each other, resulting in an effect that was far more than 1 + 1 = 2. Lin Xian also waved his spear as he sent out a piercing strike at Ling Han, bursting out with his strongest attack. However, his expression immediately changed. As the great clash of source powers assaulted him, his body exploded into pieces without any suspense, and under the crushing pressure of the violent storm, the recovery ability did not even have the chance to heal his injuries, and his body was instantly turned into dust. No, he howled, yet his voice came to an abrupt halt as he was instantly turned into dust. The storm of energy surged past, and Ling Han stood firmly. 5 great seals of Tao flickered on his body, and slowly dimmed. Though he had accomplished the magnificent feat of killing one stronger than himself, Ling Han did not look the slightest bit proud of himself. Firstly, Lin Xian was completely not his ideal enemy, and secondly, he was worried about exactly how many people like Lin Xian there were in the various great forces, and he was completely incapable of feeling any optimism. Ling Han, you are so awesome. Hunyo ran over, and pounced immediately onto his back. Ling Han laughed loudly, and patted the little girl's asterisk. All of his worries had vanished without a trace. The little girl always had this kind of charm to her, bringing only joy to others. Taking advantage of this chance, let's hurry and sneak away, Ling Han said. Otherwise, when the spiritual mountain celestial king managed to free a hand, he would definitely come and find him. Even if he was a rare dividing 9 souls great monarch tier, what was that worth in front of a celestial king? All 4 women nodded. They were naturally aware of the current situation. It was possible that there were a great many secrets and treasures hidden within this mystery realm, yet Ling Han did not feel the slightest greed. He had already obtained the source power of time, and this was his greatest gain. Additionally, freedom was the most valuable treasure there was. Ling Han channeled the source powers of the 5 elements, and this formed a perfect protection for him, hiding his aura, so it was as if he had completely vanished from the world. He drew the 4 women into the Black Tower once more, and then strode forwards. Retreat. A few days later, he had returned to the vicinity of the Great River. Unfortunately, he was met with the assault of a fierce beast again. It was an ascending origin tier, and he had no choice but to flee in a sorry state. He spent an additional 7 days' time to finally arrive at the foot of the tall mountain. On the mountain peak, there was still celestial light surging, which was incredibly terrifying. He was sure that this should be a contest that was still taking place among the celestial kings. Perhaps some super treasure had indeed appeared. Ling Han suppressed his greed. The chances of being able to snatch food from the tiger's mouth in this case, from the celestial kings was endlessly close to 0, and his best option was still to flee as quickly as he could. Xiao, a figure raced down from the mountain, his speed extremely fast. In a mere blink of the eye, he could see there was another person in hot pursuit behind him, and his speed was even faster, the distance between them becoming closer and closer. Huh! Ling Han showed a hint of astonishment. The person running in front had a golden and a silver eye. Who else could it be but Yi, the top prodigy of the Eastern Celestial Realm, who would not have known Ling Han without a battle, and had nurtured a friendship out of battle with him. Strange. Why had he also come to the Western Celestial Realm? And the person chasing behind Yi? Ling Han actually knew him as well. It was Ai Kaifeng from the Imperial Void Sect. Yi had clearly discovered Ling Han's presence, yet he acted as if he had not seen him at all. Instead, he shifted his step slightly. At first, he was practically running in Ling Han's direction, yet now he had shifted to a slight angle. Because the 2 of them were still slightly far off from each other, when he reached level with Ling Han, he should also still be very far from Ling Han. Ling Han knew that it was not that Yi had become conceited, and was unwilling to recognize him as a friend. Instead, it was the absolute opposite. Precisely because he saw Ling Han as a good friend, he deliberately ignored him to avoid dragging him into the trouble. Yet how could Ling Han be the type not to lend a helping hand when he saw a friend in trouble? He immediately rose up, and approached Yi, saying, "Long time no see, brother Yi." Ling Han. Ai Kaifeng involuntarily released a furious roar. He had long since disliked Ling Han, but because Wenren had stood in his way, his schemes had failed. Now that he saw Ling Han, it was natural that his rage would reignite. Moreover, Ling Han was acquainted with Yi. He is a first secret immortal palace tier, run. He sent out a wave of divine sense. A seal lit up beneath his feet. Peng, as he stepped on it, his figure bounced back up, and his speed suddenly soared greatly. So that was the reason. Without it, he would have been captured by Ai Kaifeng long ago. Neither of you can run. Ai Kaifeng smirked coldly. Wenren was no longer beside Ling Han. Very good, there would be no one that could stop him from killing him this time. He moved, one hand grabbing towards Ling Han, while the other grabbed out at E, wanting to capture both of them in a single stroke. He was naturally confident about this move. Ling Han was only a heaven soul, and E was only a Yin soul. The two of them added together and multiplied by 100 million would still be no match for him. Humph. Ling Han had long since become displeased with this guy. He similarly sent out both fists, one fist blasting towards E, helping him to resolve AI Kaifeng's offensive, while the other fist was launched in front of himself. Pung! Pung! Two heavy sounds rang out at practically the same time. Chapter 2158, Follow. What? AI Kaifeng practically could not believe his own eyes. The two attacks he had delivered had actually been easily resolved, and the person who had moved was Ling Han. Impossible. He almost wanted to rub his eyes just to confirm if this had really happened. A mere heaven soul was actually capable of resolving his attack, or even two attacks that had been simultaneously delivered? Was he about to defy the heavens? Ling Han. Though he had been running forwards, his divine sense had naturally allowed him to make sure that everything that happened in his vicinity was within grasp, and he, too, had clearly seen this scene. He was really close to dying in shock. In the past, Ling Han's and his strength were close, so that was why the two of them had become friends through their battle. Yet just how many thousands of years had passed by now? How had this guy become so strong? At this moment, all three people stopped moving at the same time, though both E and AI Kaifeng had stopped as a result of their shock. Ling Han smiled faintly, and said, "Brother E, since we parted, we have only reunited with much difficulty. Don't you think that we should have a nice drink and chat?" E laughed loudly. "As long as you can settle this guy, I naturally would be glad to do so. It's no big deal." Ling Han nodded. Yet AI Kaifeng exploded in fury. Two mere dividing soul tears actually declared that they would kill him. This was really a massive joke. Ling Han had indeed resolved his blow, but against a dividing soul tear, how could AI Kaifeng have gone all out? Moreover, Ling Han had to have used some kind of precious tool just now. Otherwise, no secret technique could possibly allow a dividing soul tear to cross over the natural gulf of the immortal palace tear. Reckless idiocy. AI Kaifeng charged over. Since he was not running anymore, this was naturally good news for him. Ling Han crossed his hands behind his back, and when AI Kaifeng charged right in front of him, he clenched his right hand into a fist, and delivered a countering blow. AI Kaifeng naturally would not show weakness. He, too, shot out his right fist, intending to beat Ling Han till the latter burst with this one strike. Pung! The two fists instantly crashed into one another. Strictly speaking, there was still a gap of around 9 meters between them, but the force of both attacks had crashed together first. Regulations and origin power surged out, and an astonishing brilliance spread out, and then it was the rippling out of a shock wave. Bang! Because he had been standing nearby, watching the battle, his whole person was suddenly sent flying by the shock wave, and threw up blood. He was astonished, and with a hurried tap of his feet, multiple patterns of light appeared beneath his shoes, causing him to speed up abruptly, and he actually became even faster than the shock wave created from the aftermath. AI Kaifeng felt a strong power surge towards him, and his feet involuntarily fell back multiple steps. He couldn't help but feel shocked, because not only had Ling Han not retreated in the slightest, he had taken the opening to charge towards him. Instantly, AI Kaifeng's life perspectives were all warped. He had actually been sent backwards by a heaven soul. He had been forced to retreat. This was practically a nightmare. Right, he had to still be dreaming, or how else could such an inconceivable, bizarre event possibly happen? However, reason told him that this was no dream, but a true event that had genuinely transpired. AI Kaifeng, just because your cultivation level was higher than mine, you have repeatedly mocked me, and even wanted to kill me. Hee hee, So what if your cultivation level is higher than mine? I will still beat you until you burst. Ling Han was merciless, each and every punch aiming at AI Kaifeng's lower half, looking like he was determined to destroy his D******. AI Kaifeng was enraged, embarrassed, and astonished all at the same time. He was actually no match for Ling Han, yet not only did Ling Han dare to turn around and hit him, he was actually focusing all his assault on his D******. As the saying went, never aim for the face in a fight, and the importance of the D***** was naturally greater than the faces. I'm going to kill you. AI Kaifeng roared. In the past, you couldn't kill me, and now you are even less capable of killing me, and can only be beaten by my hands till you burst. Ling Han declared coldly. Previously, because his strength was lacking, and his complete focus was also on how to flee from Wenren, he was not in the mood to tangle with AI Kaifeng. But now, it was time for revenge, and revenge was a dish best served cold. Pang! A punch landed on AI Kaifeng's D******, and his legs immediately curled up, an extremely agonized expression appearing on his face. Even if he had cultivated to the immortal palace tier, he still had a weakness, and the D***** was one of the most fragile parts of the body. Fuck, had I even trifled with you? Picking on me so many times, why are you so despicable? Ling Han sent out a few more punches, beating AI Kaifeng into the ground. Then, he raised his foot, and harshly stomped between his legs. AI Kaifeng's whole person had curled up like a giant prawn, feeling like his balls had completely shattered, and he was in terrible agony. And you even wanted to kill me? Fuck, let's see if I won't stomp you to death, bastard. Ling Han was becoming more and more angered and harsher with his stomps as time went on. He was not just simply stomping a few times, but had used the power of regulation in every stomp. It was like each stomp was capable of collapsing the heavens and cracking the earth, possessing incredibly frightening might. Since AI Kaifeng had originated from the Imperial Void sect, he definitely had means of saving himself. However, it was clear that he had already used it previously. Thus, he could only allow himself to be madly stomped on by Ling Han, and became weaker and weaker with each stomp, no longer far from death. He was both enraged and shocked. Could it be that he would become the first secret monarch tier that would die from having his D**** stomped? This would cause his name to stink for all eternity. However, Ling Han seemed to have zero intention of giving him a quick death. He was simply targeting his lower half as he stomped. Pu, copious amounts of blood sprayed out, and AI Kaifeng felt that his consciousness was becoming more and more blurred, and death was presently and rapidly enveloping him. Ling Han was completely merciless. Whoever wanted to kill him, he would take their life. This was karma, and it did not matter who the other party was. Pooh! He stomped another time, and AI Kaifeng's body was immediately split into pieces, and incredibly frightening regulations like slaughter, metal, and lightning rushed into his mind, directly destroying his spirit. A first secret monarch tier had thus died in such a humiliating manner. On the sidelines, Yi was already dumbfounded with shock. He himself was a monarch tier, and could qualify as one of the higher-ranking ones even among monarch tiers, but he completely could not imagine that a heaven soul would be able to kill an immortal palace tier at all, and a first secret monarch tier at that. Just what extent had the gap between himself and Ling Han reached? Brother Ling, I have to say that I am impressed. Previously, he had addressed Ling Han by his name directly, and only now did he address him as Brother Ling. This was showing that he was truly impressed by Ling Han. Monarch tiers naturally were all proud, but Ling Han's strength had reached a level that even monarch tiers could look up to and admire, no, check that, a level that they would have to look up to and admire on bent knees. Even as proud as Yi was, he had to acknowledge this gap, and willingly submit himself to become a little brother. Ling Han chuckled, patted Yi's shoulder, and said, I am presently being hunted by a celestial king, so let's leave this place as soon as possible. Yi couldn't help but be rendered speechless. He was a dividing soul tier, yet had been hunted by an immortal palace tier, and had just barely managed to escape alive. This made him feel extremely proud of himself. However, compared with Ling Han, he was completely left behind in the dust. Ling Han was being hunted by a celestial king. In the 9 heavens and 10 lands, celestial kings were the greatest, and even a celestial king had not been able to kill Ling Han, so just how heaven-defying was the latter? These words were naturally an exaggeration of Ling Han, but there was not much difference from the reality. The spiritual mountain celestial king would absolutely not allow him to leave. And before this, it was not just a single celestial king that had wanted to kill Ling Han, and he had still managed to flee from them. Let's go then. They set out, and threw caution to the wind. Any other matters could be set aside until they left the mystery realm. They focused on rushing their journey, but after entering into the dense jungle, they had no choice but to slow down. The insect stings that were left behind here were too frightening. The slightest contact would be fatal. They spent another 7 days' time traveling like this, and then finally exited the mystery realm. Hurriedly, they soared into the skies, and fled. Yi suddenly asked, Brother Ling, may I follow you? Chapter 2159, Fledgling Stage of Alliance. Huh. Ling Han had just been suspecting if his ears had heard it wrongly. Someone as proud as Yi would actually say such words. But upon further thought, Ling Han's present battle prowess had far surpassed the level of monarch tier, and he had indeed gained the qualifications that would make Yi willingly submit. He had never been fond of being bound. His first reaction had been to refuse, but when he thought further, his future goal was to become a heavenly venerate, and the storm of darkness was a wall that he could not circle around. A great war would definitely break out. If he went to battle a foreign realm heavenly venerate, celestial kings would naturally need to be there to oppose those 10th Lotus and 18th Lotus elites from the foreign realm as well. Hence, he indeed should develop his own force, and it had to be an incredibly powerful force at that. Thinking of this, Ling Han changed his mind, and said, Brother Yi, I have something to tell you. Come, let's go to an absolutely safe place first. Since he planned to take Yi as his capable assistant, Ling Han also chose to become upfront and honest, and brought Yi into the Black Tower. Yi was stunned. It was not that he had never entered a spatial god tool, or the blessed paradise that had been created through the great power of celestial King Tyr, but compared with this place, those were like toys made of sand that had been piled up by the hands of a child. The difference was too great. This is the internal space of a precious tool of mine. Ling Han did not directly speak of the origins of the Black Tower, but rather began explaining about the storm of darkness. As he listened, his expression gradually became serious, but there was a fighting spirit burning within his eyes. Ling Han knew that he had not erred in judgment. This was a man that was brave enough to bear responsibility, and had not chosen to flee because the foreign realm was too strong, even if he was presently just a mere soul. When he spoke of the fact that heavenly venerable Tyr was above even 9th heaven celestial king, Yi inhaled sharply. This was a strong blow to his inherent perspectives. Brother Ling, will we be fighting side by side against the storm of darkness in the future? Yi was filled with a fighting spirit. Ling Han laughed, and replied, Of course. All right. Yi clapped his hands once, his eyes burning. Then I will anticipate the arrival of that day, Ling Han said. Brother Ling, the force of darkness is too terrifying. Don't you plan on developing your own force? Yi asked. Ling Han nodded. I do indeed have such plans, but there are many elites in the foreign realm. If I want to establish my own force, every single member would need to possess powerful strength. Let's put it this way, they would have to all be celestial kings at least, or possess the potential to become a celestial king. Others would definitely kill themselves with laughter if they heard this. Celestial kings could establish their own great sect, so why would they have to lodge under another person's roof, and obey the commands of another? Even for factions like Ninth Heaven Celestial King tier forces, there would only be about 100 Celestial Kings in the sect. The absolute majority would be those like Ascending Origin tiers, Immortal Palace tiers, and Dividing Soul tiers. Yet he did not see anything strange about it. Without becoming Celestial Kings, they would not be qualified to stand against the storm of darkness at all. Brother Ling, since you have this idea, I can help you to contact some monarch tiers. There is no need for us to establish a great sect, but we can set up an alliance instead. Ling Han nodded. Most monarch tiers were nurtured by great sects, and to say nothing of whether these great sects would be willing to relinquish them, these monarch tiers might not want to leave either. But if it was just forming an alliance, that would be different. There was no need to surrender their present status and identity, and they merely had to rally on the same side when they were opposing the storm of darkness. All right. Ling Han nodded. After some thought, he took out a great amount of reincarnation tree leaves, which he handed over to Yi. Take these reincarnation tree leaves, and you may bestow them as gifts as appropriate. Consider it a show of sincerity from me. Reincarnation tree leaves. Yi couldn't help but exclaim in shock. This could assist in comprehending Tao, and even celestial kings would be happy to use them as tea leaves. This space has time acceleration of 100,000 times, and is very helpful for cultivation as well, Ling Han said smilingly, revealing another, tiny, secret. Additionally, I am a 4-star alchemist, and am presently breaking through to 5 stars. You may talk about this as well. Yi was gaping in shock. 100,000 times of time acceleration, and such a colossal space, this was too much. Even when his master went all out, he could only set up a time acceleration formation of around 400 times. Furthermore, the formation could not be maintained for too long either. How could a celestial king compare to a heavenly venerate? Heavenly venerate was an existence that had surpassed this heaven and earth, and naturally was out of the control of this heaven and earth. Initially, the Black Tower had not been so awesome, but added with the source power of time, it was a completely different story. This was an external object, and Yi could only envy Ling Han's good fortune, but more importantly, Ling Han was also a 4-star alchemist. That was too much. How could there be such a freak? How could anyone else live with such high standards? He took a deep breath, and only came back to his senses after a considerably long time. So Brother Ling is also a 4-star alchemist. Then, I will have more certainty in convincing the others. Right. Yi suddenly slipped off the shoes he had been wearing. This is the treasure I discovered on the Divine Mountain. After wearing and activating them, speed can soar greatly. It is also precisely because of this that I had been hunted by that member of the Imperial Void sect. Ling Han nodded. Ai Kaifeng wanted to kill him and snatch the treasure, but had not thought that Yi, a Yin soul, would actually obtain a burst of speed after obtaining these precious shoes, and he had chased him all the way down the mountain. In the end, he just happened to bump into Ling Han, who had turned the situation around and killed himself instead, with Ai Kaifeng surrendering all the treasures he possessed to Ling Han. Delivering his own life and surrendering treasures as well, what a kind person. Brother Ling, in thanks for your help, and also receiving gifts from you, this will be my return gift to you. Yi handed the pair of shoes over. Ling Han swept an eye over them. These shoes were woven from bamboo, and were really nothing special to look at. However, what kind of place was this? In the past, 2 heavenly venerates had died together here, and it was very possible that these straw sandals had been worn by Xiao Gu's last life's incarnation. Having been touched by the aura of a heavenly venerate, even if they had really just been a pair of ordinary straw sandals, they would become incredibly amazing. A gentleman does not take the favorite belongings of others. Brother Yi, I appreciate your good intentions, Ling Han refused. Yet he shook his head. If Brother Ling is unwilling to accept, I cannot bring myself to accept Brother Ling's gift either. Pushing to and fro is such a waste of time. Nyo will take it. Hu Nyo could not bear to watch, and jumped out to snatch the straw sandals. The Empress, meanwhile, smiled faintly. The little girl's action was greatly compatible with her own thoughts. Anything precious would have to belong to the Ling clan, but it was another story whether they wanted it or not. Since that was the case, Ling Han did not say anything further. He was not the type to be sloppy, either. He and Yi discussed some more about building the alliance, and he finally gifted Yi some more dragon crystals. Then, he escorted Yi out of the Black Tower, and they went their separate ways. Yi had come to adventure in the Western Celestial Realm this time, and now it was about time for him to return. He also had a mission now to unite the Emperor tiers and Monarch tiers of the Eastern Celestial Realm as much as possible, and form an alliance to resist the storm of darkness together in the future. King tiers were unnecessary, as it was absolutely impossible for them to become celestial kings. Even if they were brought to the battlefield, they would only be cannon fodder. Ling Han suddenly remembered that Small Tower had once said that the numbers of celestial kings in the celestial realm should far surpass the number that was apparent on the surface, but the number of celestial kings and celestial king tier forces that Ling Han had seen or heard of was not high. Was it because those celestial kings had all gone to fight against the storm of darkness? The foreign realm had been continuously unleashing offensives, but the connecting point could not yet allow heavenly venerates to pass through at the moment. When that day really came, a great war that would involve the entire celestial realm would definitely break out once more. Ling Han mused ruefully, and then set out towards the rock heaven. Chapter 2160, The Peach Blossom Origins. Next, Ling Han planned to first pick up his parents, Helian Xuan and the others. Then, he would venture to the Heavenly Saint Palace to visit his son, and learn that omnipresent technique while he was there, and then head off to the Imperial Void Sect. He did not have any positive feelings towards the Sealed Emotion Palace or the Imperial Void Sect, so entering into the Imperial Void Sect was firstly a stepping stone for him to investigate that mysterious Sealed Emotion Palace, and secondly, he wanted to rob the complete treasure trove of this great sect. Whatever the case, they had to pay a little interest first. He used the regulations of space, and added the regulations of time, and his whole person had become ethereal. Time and space seemed to be completely warped, and the burst of speed he gained was astonishingly fast. He then tried on those straw sandals, and once they were activated, his speed increased in a burst of 10 times over. This allowed his speed to be capable of matching the ascending origin tier. Ling Han couldn't help but smile in satisfaction. Now, as long as it was not a celestial king that moved against him, he would not need to duck into the Black Tower for any kind of attack he faced. He could completely oppose the attack with the techniques that he presently possessed. However, even the extreme speed of the ascending origin tier could not possibly compare to the means of a celestial king tier. Ling Han used a whole 7 months' time to finally return to the rock heaven. It was still the same heaven and earth, but Ling Han's feelings were completely different. The rock palace had initially been the most powerful force of the rock heaven. In fact, in the whole Western Celestial Realm, it could be ranked in the higher echelons. However, now the master of the rock heaven had become the Four Seas Palace, and the flags that belonged to the Four Seas Palace were raised all over the territory that had originally belonged to the Rock Palace. All the locals were forced to switch to worshipping the Four Seas Palace, and believing in Shangji Wei. Belief was a kind of power. This was not a power of the heaven and earth, but rather one unearthed from multiple generations of descendants. One person's power was negligible, but after they were all gathered together, a mighty power could be created that would make even elites stunned. However, this kind of power could only be used by celestial kings. Because it did not belong to the power of the heaven and earth, and was outside of regulations. Ordinary cultivators could not possibly draw on it. Only celestial kings that had reached the height of the heavens could harvest the power of belief for their own use. Ling Han shook his head, and released the 4 women from the Black Tower. Then, with Hunyo leading the way, they journeyed onwards. After around 10 days, they arrived at a tall mountain. This place was only a mere 5,000 kilometers from the mountains of the Rock Heaven, and elites would be able to arrive here in just a short while. Their father-in-law and mother-in-law are in the valley below, Hunyo said. Though her wedding with Ling Han had not been held yet, with how she continued on her own way, how could she possibly be concerned about these paltry matters? She was already directly addressing them as father-in-law and mother-in-law. Ling Han nodded, slightly excited. He actually could not take a step forward. Let's go. It was the Empress who gave Ling Han a hand, and brought him down the mountain. Hunyo was not willing to fall back, and hurriedly snatched Ling Han's other arm, so bewitching Maiden Ro could only pout moodily. They descended from the mountain, and entered into the valley. Goodness, this place had so many people. Ling Han had thought that only his parents, Helian Xuan, and the others would be here. Added together, there would just be a dozen or so of them, but now the people of this valley numbered in the tens of thousands. Who goes there? Someone discovered Ling Han and his group, and immediately shouted, to actually dare to barge into the Peach Blossom Origins, are you tired of living? Ling Han frowned slightly. This person looked to be in his 40s, and his cultivation level was the Mountain River tier. His flame of life had burned for over 3,000 years. If he had been in the ancient realm, he definitely could have been considered a super genius. However, in the celestial realm, this could only be considered so. This person's natural talent for cultivation was average, yet he could advance to the Mountain River tier at around 3,000 years old. He had to have gotten the support of a great volume of cultivation resources, and had practically been forcibly pushed up to this height. What caused Ling Han to frown was not the problem of this person's cultivation level, but rather that his attitude was too brash. Even if others accidentally barged in, he absolutely could have chosen to ask the intruder to leave in a peaceful manner. My name is Ling Han. Who is the person in charge here? I would like to ask for an audience, Ling Han said. Because he was about to see his parents, he suppressed his displeasure as well. What a joke. You barged into the Peach Blossom Origins, and actually delude yourself into thinking of getting an audience with our Valley Master? That person scoffed, appearing extremely contemptuous. Huaming, what is going on? Another man walked over. He looked to be in his 30s, yet his cultivation level had reached the Sun-Moon tier. In truth, he was several hundred years older than the previous person, though he looked much younger. Granduncle Zilu. The previous person hurriedly paid his greetings. These 5 people barged here, and said they wanted to meet with the Grand Elder. Ha! The person who had come after involuntarily laughed coldly, his eyes sweeping over Ling Han and the others. He was just about to rebuke them, yet his eyes suddenly glowed brightly. All of a sudden, he had been captivated by Hunyo and the others. Lord Valley Master is not someone that you can meet just because you wish for it. However, if there is anything, you may speak with me about it. For better or worse, I am at least the protector here, he declared with great pride. Ling Han could only feel this was inconceivable. They were clearly just a Mountain River tier and Sun-Moon tier, so why did they have such a puffed-up opinion of themselves? Could it be that they thought that this was the ancient realm, and not the celestial realm? Otherwise, how could they have such a powerful superiority complex? Is Helian Xuan here? What about Lu Yutong? Or Li Si Chan? Zhu Xian Shui Yenyu? Ling Han uttered the names of many people in a single breath. The person who had come after couldn't help but inhale sharply. How dare you, to actually directly address the names of the lady matriarchs, you deserve to die 10,000 times over. When he spoke of death, he moved aggressively, grabbing out at Ling Han's chest. He actually wanted to claw out Ling Han's heart, and kill him. Ling Han was even more displeased. With a tap of his finger, that person had instantly turned into a wooden statue, and could not even move a single finger. How dare you? To actually dare make a move on the people of the Peach Blossom Origins, don't you know that we are under the protection of the Rock Palace? Kill him. When they saw Ling Han actually dared to move, the people in the vicinity all drew their weapons, surrounding Ling Han and his group. Their main target was still Ling Han. As the four women were all delicate beauties, especially the Empress and Hunyo, others did not even dare to offend them. Ling Han humphed, his aura slightly spreading out. Pa, pa, pa. These people all immediately stumbled to the ground, their weapons all falling from their hands on the ground. Invaders! Move out, defense squad! Someone called out loudly, and in only a while, a troop of 100 men appeared. They were all in the mountain river tier, and surrounded Ling Han and his group once more. However, they merely surrounded them without attacking. It was unknown whether it was that they had not received any command to attack, or if they were wary of Ling Han's strength. A while later, the crowd split apart, and a young man walked out from the path that had been created. He looked to be only in his 20s, and his flame of life had only been burning several hundred years, but his cultivation level had shockingly reached the Genesis tier, far surpassing every other person here. His natural talent for cultivation was extremely outstanding. This young man was dressed in white robes, and held a paper fan in his hands. His showiness was practically directly in their faces. Young Master Long. Now that young Master Long has appeared, he would definitely be capable of suppressing everything. To dare act insolent in our Peach Blossom Origins, they really have no idea what death is. Everyone was cheering loudly, seeming to be filled with confidence in this young man. The white-robed young man was also extremely proud. First, he glanced disdainfully at Ling Han, and then looked towards Hunyo and the other women. Astonishing light immediately shot from his eyes. He humphed, and demanded, "You, just commit suicide." These words were directed at Ling Han. Ling Han was shocked. What was going on with these people? Wasn't this the valley that his parents and the others were residing in? Why were there so many strange weirdos popping out? Chapter 2161, Reunited. N. The white-robed young man stared at Ling Han, an expression of displeasure showing on his face. I told you to commit suicide, and you are actually not moving yet. Do you plan on a terribly painful death? Ling Han shook his head, and turned to glance at Hunyo and the other women, asking, Have we entered a den of thieves here? How dare you? The white-robed young man flew into a rage, and stretched out a hand to grab Ling Han, planning to apprehend this disrespectful man. Everyone was shouting battle cries, providing encouragement for this young man. Peng, the white-robed young man's hand directly grabbed Ling Han's chest. All right. Kill this insolent, arrogant man. To actually dare come to our place and behave so atrociously. Everyone around them was calling out in excitement. As they saw it, it was very normal that Ling Han would be completely unable to fight back, because the young man could practically be considered the strongest elite of the valley. Ah, a terrible cry rang out, yet it was not from Ling Han, but rather came from that white-robed young man. He held his right wrist in his left hand, his expression filled with pain. All 5 fingers of his right hand had been twisted in an exaggerated manner, and the mere sight would induce empathetic pain and a corresponding chill to rise up in those who saw it. At this moment, sounds of gasps rang out in the surroundings. How was this possible? Cheng Zilong was a great elite of the Genesis tier, and was practically known as the strongest elite in the entire valley. How could he have possibly lost in a single move? Instead, it was he who had broken his own fingers. Let go of young Master Long. We are the esteemed guests of the Rock Palace. Do you know what kind of force the Rock Palace is? They are no one that you can afford to trifle with. Everyone soon exclaimed all at once. However, this time, they were using the Rock Palace as an intimidation tactic. These people's news was too outdated, wasn't it? Didn't they know that the Rock Palace had already been forced into disbanding? Ling Han shook his head, and suddenly released a loud cry towards the skies. His voice rolled out like thunder, like the howl of a dragon. Xiao, Xiao, Xiao. Immediately, more people leaped out of the valley. Without entering into the severing mundane tier, they would not be capable of flying in the celestial realm. Ancestor. First Madam. Second Madam. Everyone paid their respects to those who had just arrived, their expressions respectful. Ancestor, please ask the elites of the Rock Palace to seek justice for Long-er. The white-robed young man half-knelt in front of a middle-aged couple. This insolent man not only barged forcibly into our valley, and even wounded me. Husband. A sharp cry rang out, and a beautiful woman had already rushed out, pouncing towards Ling Han. Then, another beautiful woman rushed out, and pounced towards Ling Han. Then, it was the third and the fourth. Everyone was all dumbfounded. These few ladies were all the wives of their Lord Valley Master. Though they had never seen Lord Valley Master, they had only been told that he would eventually return one day. But why were they pouncing towards an unfamiliar man? Hang on. Realization suddenly dawned on them. Could it be that this unfamiliar man was Ling Han? Honor. Ling Dongxing and Yu Hongchang both raced over, pouncing towards their precious son. Father, mother. Ling Han called out, and felt his eyes become slightly damp. Even if he was a great monarch tier that was invincible among his peers, there was always a soft, tender spot in the depths of his heart. Seeing this scene, even the stupidest person would understand who Ling Han was, and also knew just what a great mistake it was that they had made. The white-robed young man also came out of his shock. His face was completely flushed red. He had been humiliated in public, but not only were his two grand elders not the slightest bit concerned about him, they were instead incredibly cordial towards the culprit, and this made him even more infuriated. Ling Han's eyes swept over them. Lu Yutong, Li Si-chan, Zhu Xian-er, Helian Xuanxue, and the others were all by his side, and they all showed overjoyed expressions, causing him to involuntarily feel touched as he said, "I've made you all wait." Meanwhile, Hunyo yawned, and looked bored. At the same time, she was also slightly displeased. Only with much difficulty had she managed to take all these witches from Ling Han's side, and now they were back again. These are all. Ling Dongxing and his wife looked at the Empress, Hunyo, bewitching Maiden Ro, and the others, looking stunned. Though it was Hunyo who had made arrangements for them to settle here, Hunyo had never even come here before. Thus, Ling Dongxing and his wife's impression of Hunyo was still of her as a child, and they were completely unable to link this woman who looked like a celestial maiden with the child Hunyo. Ling Han smiled, and said, "Let me introduce. This is Hunyo." Pooh! Ling Dongxing and his wife, Helian Xuanxue, and the other women all spluttered. All of them had seen Hunyo when she was a child, but they had always thought that this little girl would never grow up, and now that they had seen such a beautiful young woman, they could not believe their eyes. What is it? Nyo can't be pretty. Hunyo was greatly displeased, and bared her teeth, hands on her hips. In this way, everyone nodded. This was definitely Hunyo. After a round of introductions, the women all got to know each other. The Empress only said a few words, and was naturally able to have the other women center around her, and submit to her authority completely, while Ling Dongxing and his wife asked Ling Han endless questions. Father, mother, what has happened here? A figure descended, and it was a poised woman, and her words were directed at Ling Dongxing and his wife. Father, mother? Instantly, a surprised expression came over Ling Han's face, and then realization dawned on him. Ling Dongxing and his wife were slightly flushed, and said to Ling Han, "Come, this is your younger sister, Ling Yuan." "Brother?" The beautiful woman looked at Ling Han, showing a hint of surprise in her expression. He is your elder brother, Ling Han." Yu Hongchang pulled on her daughter's hand. The two women stood together, and there indeed were some similarities they shared. Ling Han looked towards his father, and couldn't help but give him a thumbs up. His old man was really awesome, creating a younger sister that was younger than even Ling Han's own son. However, age was really not all that important in the celestial realm. Everyone could live several tens of billions of years at the drop of a hat. If one was really serious about calculating the generations, they would just drive themselves dizzy. "Brother!" Ling Yuan called out clearly. Ling Han smiled, and replied, "Sister. Come, let's go in first. We'll discuss slowly afterwards," Ling Dongxing said smilingly. They couldn't just continue chatting outside, after all. They entered indoors, and Ling Dongxing and his wife couldn't wait to ask about Ling Han's experiences all these years. However, Ling Han merely sketched over the details, making absolutely no mention of the various dangers he had encountered, not wanting to make his parents worry. When they were done talking about his matters, the topic of conversation naturally turned back to Ling Dongxing and his wife. Their experiences were much calmer. After they were brought by Hunyo to the celestial realm, they settled down in this place. Then, they accidentally gave birth to Ling Yuan, and then Ling Yuan married, and gave birth to 3 sons, and then these 3 sons married, and had their own children. Thus, this valley gradually became livelier. Because there were now many of them, for the convenience of management, they set up a force modeled as a clan. Of course, in the celestial realm, this was practically just playing around. They did not even have a severing mundane grand elder. However, because the people in the valley were cut off from the outside world, it was inevitable that they would be ignorant, and develop an exaggerated opinion of themselves. Added with the fact that they thought that they still had the rock palace to depend on, a trend of arrogance was slowly developed. When it had reached this generation, it could no longer be controlled. Thankfully, this place was at the foot of the mountains of the Rock Palace, and unconcerned people could not possibly reach this place. Those that were qualified to come would also not bother about them on the basis of the Rock Palace. This caused the people of the valley to become even more arrogant and proud. "Then where is my brother-in-law?" Ling Han asked. Chapter 2162, Ungrateful Cheng Clan. Once Ling Han asked, Ling Yuan immediately frowned. "What's wrong?" Ling Dongxing hurriedly asked. Ling Yuan seemed like she wanted to say something, but then hesitated. "Your elder brother is no stranger. What on earth happened?" Yu Hongchang asked as well. With the repeated questioning, Ling Yuan finally answered, "It's Yifeng." "What's wrong with Yifeng?" Yu Hongchang questioned closely. This Yifeng had the surname of Cheng, and was Ling Yuan's husband, as well as the son-in-law of the Ling clan. Ling Yuan answered, "Yifeng said that the Rock Palace has been destroyed, and there is an unspeakable relation between our Ling clan and the Rock Palace, so he wishes to sever our matrimonial relation to prevent the Cheng clan from being implicated as well." "What?" Ling Dongxing was immediately furious, and slammed a hand fiercely on the table. To attain this matrimonial union with the Ling clan, the Cheng clan had been extremely humble, and it was also Cheng Yifeng who was the most versed in speaking sweet, pleasant words, such that he had successfully enchanted Ling Yuan, who had been inexperienced and completely naive. Actually, Ling Yuan had had too many options at the time. Who knew how many clans had strength that was far superior to the Cheng clans, yet Ling Yuan had still ultimately chosen Cheng Yifeng. The Cheng clan was a severing mundane tier force. In the rock heaven, it was naturally a negligible to the point of being unnoticeable force, but no matter how small they were still stronger than the Ling clan, so why had they gone to so much effort just to get a connection with the Ling clan? Naturally, it was because they had their eye on the colossal giant standing behind the Ling clan, the Rock Palace. The Cheng clan's choice had brought them great benefits. After becoming in-laws with the Ling clan, the Cheng clan had obtained a considerably valuable dowry from the Ling clan, and their clan's grand elder had even broken through to the dividing soul tier due to this. But now? The Rock Palace had been destroyed by the Four Seas Palace, and the Cheng clan feared that they would be eradicated as well by the Four Seas Palace, so they naturally chose to draw a clear dividing line between themselves and the Ling clan. However, the Cheng clan's level was too low, so it was also late when they received the news. Only now had they finally reacted. If the Four Seas Palace wanted to call them for an accounting, how could they have possibly waited until today? In brief terms, since the Ling clan no longer had value for exploitation, and could possibly cause detrimental effects on the Cheng clan, they naturally abandoned this burden immediately. What does the Rock Palace being destroyed mean? Yu Hongchang wore a strange expression. Wasn't it false? Hunyo was still standing here. I'm not sure either. Ling Yuan was a little dazed. They were all too cut off from recent news. Ling Han interrupted, a great change has indeed happened in the Rock Palace. But that bastardly brat should not have left Yuan at this time either. What does he mean by that? Ling Dongxing slammed his hand loudly on the table. His daughter had actually been left, so he was naturally enraged. This should not be Feng's own intentions. He must have said so because his clan compelled him to. Ling Yuan was still speaking up on behalf of her husband. Ling Han waved her off and said, "Sister, let's go on to the Cheng clan, and meet with brother-in-law." Ling Yuan instantly looked troubled. Some time ago, when Cheng Yifeng returned to the Cheng clan, he never came back again. She could not hold herself back today, and thus went to the Cheng clan. In the end, Cheng Yifeng chased her away, and said that he wanted to sever their matrimonial relations. Additionally, there were still a great many people in the valley that belonged to the Cheng clan. They came here because they had their eye on the resources of the Ling clan. After all, Hunyo definitely could not be stingy with Ling Dongxing and his wife. Furthermore, the cultivation resources beneath celestial medicines really could not be considered much. These people would also immediately retreat back to the Cheng clan. After all, the Ling clan would no longer gain any more benefits from the Rock Palace, so what was the point of staying behind any further? This, Ling Yuan said hesitatingly. Her heart was still siding with her husband, and hoped that the latter would change his mind, and come back to her. Attention to all members of our Cheng clan, pack up immediately, and return to our clan. Right at this moment, a person was heard calling out loudly in the valley, his voice rolling out like thunder. Yes, Elder Taiheng, the members of the Cheng clan all called out in answer, and began packing up. They had already gotten all their gains, and now planned to run. Ling Han humphed, and immediately raced out. His eyes swept around, and he saw that a man was standing in midair. His hands were crossed behind his back, a proud expression on his face. Ths was an elder of the Cheng clan, someone along the lines of an elder of a sect. His name was Cheng Taiheng, and he was a second severance. This kind of cultivation level was not much in the celestial realm, but in this small valley, where the strongest elite was only at the Genesis tier, he naturally was qualified enough to look down on the people of the valley in contempt. Shameless villains can all get out. However, whatever of our Ling clan that you have used and eaten, return them wholly. Ling Han declared. And who are you? Cheng Taiheng looked down from his lofty position, looking down on Ling Han. Because Ling Han had sealed his own aura off with the source powers of heaven and earth, no one below Celestial King tier could possibly see through the depths of his cultivation levels. Cheng Taiheng naturally would consider Ling Han beneath him. The Ling clan was only supported by the Rock Palace, so how could they have any kind of elites or talents? In the valley, the members of the Cheng clan had gradually packed up their belongings, and were preparing to leave. Elder Taiheng. Cheng Zilong leaped out, and knelt down on one knee in front of Cheng Taiheng. This person has humiliated me before, so please seek justice for my sake, Elder. N. Cheng Taiheng showed a slight expression of surprise. Cheng Zilong was the most outstanding clansman in the younger generation of the Cheng clan, and it was precisely because of this that he had been sent here. The cultivation resources that he could obtain here were far superior to what he could gain in the Cheng clan. Yet Cheng Zilong was actually outmatched by Ling Han? Impossible. However, anger immediately caused him to forget this fact. In any case, the Ling clan was completely negligible, so what need was there for him to take it to heart? He humphed, and his eyes turned on to Ling Han as he said, "How dare you, to actually dare make a move on one of the members of our Cheng clan?" What Ling Han hated the most was ungrateful traitors, and more importantly, the Cheng clan had gone too far. They had exploited his younger sister to obtain the resources from Rock Palace, and now that Rock Palace had fallen, they couldn't even wait to separate themselves from the Ling clan, and even a wife could be thrown aside. Fuck, he could not tolerate this. I will give Cheng Yifeng 3 days to kneel with every step he takes, and come seek forgiveness for my younger sister. However, I will slaughter the entire Cheng clan until no one is left alive. Ling Han declared coldly. If he had not seen the expectant expression on Ling Yuan's face, and knew that she was completely besotted with Cheng Yifeng, he wouldn't even bother. All ungrateful traitors should all just be killed. Ha ha ha, where has this arrogant madman come from? He really has no idea of his own weight. Cheng Taiheng smirked coldly. Elder, please seek justice for me. Cheng Zilong hurriedly begged once more. All right. Cheng Taiheng suppressed the slight doubt in his heart. It was definitely impossible that the Ling clan had any kind of elite. He stretched out his right hand, which moved to cover Ling Han. Wang, regulations manifested in a gigantic inky black hand, which grabbed out at Ling Han. Ling Han couldn't bother to move, and only breathed out towards Cheng Taiheng. Whoosh! Wild winds blew madly, and that black gigantic hand instantly shattered in the wind, and the great gust did not slow its speed, and immediately rushed towards Cheng Taiheng. Shwa, shwa, shwa. The hurricane winds were as sharp as blades, and the flesh and blood from Cheng Taiheng's body was visibly scraped off cleanly, leaving behind only a skeleton, and then the skeleton itself was also shattered. When the wild winds had passed, Cheng Taiheng's whole person had vanished completely. Deathly silence descended. That was Cheng Taiheng, a grand second severance elder, and he had actually been killed with the breeze someone had breathed out. This monster, he had to be a monster. Cheng Zilong's whole body shuddered, and an indescribable chill rose up from the depths of his heart as his legs involuntarily trembled. Longer names like this one and others in the first several hundred chapters of the novel were divided into 3 words, and we followed this in recent chapters as a reminder that they're the same people. Now, however, we will switch back to surname plus first name style. Why the difference? 2 words is the style used in mainland China when using pinyin. 3 words are used in places like Singapore. We have basically used the wrong style at the start. Chapter 2163, Just Dividing Soul Tier. What kind of monster was this, to have killed a grand severing mundane tier elder with a single breath? At first, the members of the Cheng clan were still shouting, and looking disdainfully at him, but now they were all struck silent. How could the Ling clan have such a powerful character? Ling Han's eyes swept over them, and he asked, "Who wants to return to the Cheng clan?" The members of the Cheng clan all shook their heads in unison. What a joke. If anyone nodded at this moment, wouldn't he be just courting death? Ling Han sighed. I need someone to bring the news back to the Cheng clan. Is there no one who would volunteer? Me. 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 At this, everyone hurriedly raised their hands, scrambling over each other. They had set aside the kinship of clansmen. It was good enough as long as they could leave this bringer of calamity. Ling Han swept a glance over them, and randomly pointed out a person. You'll do. Thank you, my lord. Thank you, my lord. That person quickly nodded his head in gratitude, feeling as if he had just managed to luckily save himself. Just how much stuff of the Ling clan have you used throughout these many years, do you still remember? Ling Han asked. That man's eyes turned quickly. Why was he still calling him in for accounting? He replied, my lord, I probably haven't used much. Hee. Ling Han flicked out a finger. Pa! That person's arms immediately exploded, causing a shower of blood. This is interest. Go on, tell the clan leader of the Cheng clan. First option, have Cheng Yifeng kneel with every step he takes towards here, and the second option? Calculate just how much of the Ling clan's property you have used, and return it in full. That person screamed, tearing up in his extreme pain. Any more howling, and I'll chop off your legs as well. Ling Han's voice deepened. That person hurriedly stopped his screams, and broke into a run and fled. Ling Han turned his eyes once more on the other members of the Cheng clan. Everyone shuddered as his eyes passed over them, and felt like their hearts were about to explode. This was a bringer of calamity that wouldn't even blink before committing murder. And when Ling Han's eyes shifted from them, everyone would be breathing loudly, as if a heavy weight had been lifted off of them. Finally, Ling Han looked towards Cheng Zilong. At this moment in time, all of Cheng Zilong's arrogance had naturally disappeared without a trace. He already knew that Ling Han's strength was innumerable times stronger than him. He could kill even a Grand Second Severance Elder with a single breath, so he had to be a Grand Third Severance, or even Fourth Severance Elder, at least. He did not make a sound, wanting to preserve some of his pride, but his trembling body had still betrayed him. Ling Han humphed lowly. Pa! Cheng Zilong's legs instantly weakened from the scare, and knelt heavily onto the ground, his face ashen. You can just be an example. Ling Han summoned a rock, and casually tossed it over at Cheng Zilong, weighing him down with the rock. This counted as punishment? The members of the Cheng clan saw this, and did not take objection to it. Right. If this large rock was weighing down on an ordinary person, it was definitely an extremely painful punishment, but to a cultivator who was slightly accomplished, this was no big deal, what more when Cheng Zilong was a Genesis tier elite. It was definitely superficial for this rock to press down on him. However, beyond their expectations, Cheng Zilong released a blood-curdling scream as if his internal organs were getting torn out. Someone immediately understood, and muttered softly, young Master Long must be doing it deliberately. If he looked very pained, that bringer of calamity would naturally not impose other punishments. That's right. If it is merely superficial, and that bringer of calamity becomes angered, it will be over if he simply decides to kill him. It is still young Master Long that is smarter. But after a while, everyone realized that there was something off. Cheng Zilong did not look like he was acting. Cold sweat had covered his entire body, and was mingled with blood, dampening the ground beneath his body. If this was really an act, that was really over the top. Hiss, could it be that he was really suffering a great agony? Cheng Zilong was indeed not acting. Though Ling Han had just randomly picked a rock over, he had cast the regulations of earth on it, causing the weight of the rock to reach an unimaginable extent. Added with a bit of the regulations of metal, which increased its destructive power, Cheng Zilong would feel as if blades were cutting into him. Just like he had said, this was an example. Think carefully how much have you all taken from the Ling clan, and write it down, without leaving anything out. If I discover any discrepancy, this will be your example, so you can all take a good look. Saying such, Ling Han returned indoors. With the coverage of the divine sense of a great elite like himself, who could manage to flee? Ling Han, just how strong have you become by now? Xuan's small mouth was gaping, her beautiful eyes widened. In the past, she had only been at the mountain river tier, and though her natural talent was not too low, her future accomplishment would possibly be limited to peak stage sun-moon tier, but after coming to the celestial realm, with unlimited resources poured into her, she had forcibly climbed up to the Genesis tier within 10,000 years. It was too hard to breach the barrier of the severing mundane tier, but she was still extremely satisfied with how far she had come. As long as she could survive the immortal's tribulation that would come every 100 million years, she would have a lifespan as long as 100 billion years, and had a sliver of hope in breaking through to the severing mundane tier. If she really became a severing mundane tier, her lifespan would be equal to the heavens. In truth, even the Genesis tier was a cultivation level that she had not even dared to dream about, and she constantly suspected if this was just a dream. But Ling Han's cultivation level was actually higher than hers. In fact, it had reached a height that she couldn't even distinguish clearly, so how could she believe it? It should be known that she had been backed by the Rock Palace, and had an ocean of resources to support her. That's right, little brother, just how strong are you now? The Lunar King was also looking at him seductively. Her style had not changed, but as her cultivation level reached the Genesis tier, she had become increasingly alluring. She felt even more regret. If all this had happened earlier, she would have been able to destroy the Heaven Sword Palace and the other 5 sects with a single finger, and it would have been more than enough to open the sky, so how would Ma Duobao's venture to open the sky have failed? Even Xuan and the other women were all looking at Ling Han anxiously. As they hoped, the stronger that Ling Han was, the better, of course. Ling Han grinned. Just the dividing soul tier. Pooh! Everyone choked. Just the dividing soul tier? Did you know that the dividing soul tier was already the second rung in the ladder in the celestial path? Most people would need to spend tens to hundreds of billions of years to reach this kind of height. Just how much time had you spent? Hu Niu's expression was filled with pride, and she declared, he's a heaven soul at that. Pooh, everyone spluttered madly again. Heaven soul, that was the final minor level of the dividing soul tier. Just advance a little further, and that would be the immortal palace tier, ascending to the third rung of the ladder in the celestial path. This was too much. How had he been cultivating? And not an ordinary heaven soul, but one that has formed 9 divided souls, so his battle prowess has directly soared to the immortal palace tier, the Empress continued. Anything that would show off her husband naturally had to be discussed in great detail. In any case, this was the truth as well. In the past, 2 first secret monarch tiers had been killed by Ling Han's hand. Restricted by their level, Xuan and the others did not know what monarch tier meant, but they were still aware of what first secret meant. That was the first minor level of the immortal palace tier. Which also meant that Ling Han was really capable of killing immortal palace tiers. Good heavens! Honor! Ling Dongxing was extremely excited, his hands clapping onto Ling Han's shoulders, while he was practically tearing up. Brother, are you really that strong? Meanwhile, Ling Yuan's eyes were shining. Though their backer, the Rock Palace, had fallen, Ling Han had risen up strongly. With this kind of older brother, Cheng Yifeng would definitely change his mind and come back to her. She did not care what Cheng Yifeng had done before. As long as he could continue to stay by her side, that would be enough for her. Ling Han sighed. This younger sister's personality was really too weak. Chapter 2164, Visitor from the Cheng clan. If it was Ling Han, what need would he have for Cheng Yifeng to change his mind and return? He would simply kill him with a single punch. But since Ling Yuan was so stubbornly faithful to the man, he could only opt for a more roundabout route. Once his authority was established, then as long as he was there, the Cheng clan would treat Ling Yuan like their own ancestor and worship her, not daring to treat her lightly in the slightest bit. "Honor, you are getting more and more outstanding," Yu Hongchang mused ruefully. It was her son who had saved her from her prison, allowing for the husband and wife to reunite, and it was also Ling Han who gave them the chance to enter into the celestial realm, allowing them to advance to Genesis tier even with their average talent. This was something that they had not even dared to think of before. And now, Ling Han had once again become the pillar of support for their whole family, blocking all winds and rain. "Nyo's Ling Han is the most awesome." Hu Nyo hung from Ling Han's back, her small face filled with pride and satisfaction. Helian Xuanxue and the other women's eyes were also shining, gentle and alluring. "Cough, I won't disturb you guys then." The Lunar King turned around and left. "I'm going too." Yi Shuangshuang also left tactfully. Ling Dongxing and his wife and Ling Yuan also left the house, leaving behind the space for Ling Dongxing and his group of lovers. "Husband." The women all pounced towards him suddenly, kissing Ling Han madly. It had been over 10,000 years, and they had missed him dearly. Ling Han embraced them all by his side, feeling incredibly rueful. So many years had passed, and their family had finally reunited. The women were crying and laughing then crying, causing Hu Nyo to feel incredibly disdainful. They really were so childish. They did not do anything improper, but merely chatted about the experiences they had gone through in these many years, and spent a whole 3 days just talking about it. Finally, someone from the Cheng clan came. The person who had brought the news back was only a mountain river tier, and would still need some time to climb mountains and cross the distance. Thus, his return trip itself had taken over a day's time, and then the Cheng clan had also discussed the issue for over a day due to Ling Han's sudden appearance, deliberating exactly what kind of strategy they should adopt. Finally, right when the 3rd day was about to end, they finally made their decision, and that was to send someone here. The Cheng clan had not mobilized many people, but it was rather just 7 people. 6 of them were old men, while the last was a young man. The 6 old geezers were clan elders of the Cheng clan, and had long since broken through to the severing mundane tier. 3 of them had reached the 4th severance, even. That final young man looked to be only in his late teens, but the aura he exuded had shockingly reached the severing mundane tier. His name was Cheng Wuya, and he was a prodigy from the last generation of the Cheng clan. He had used a mere 30 million years to advance to the severing mundane. This was an extremely astonishing accomplishment, and he was also the top prodigy in the history of the Cheng clan. 7 great severing mundane tiers moved out, and that was around 2/3 of the top strength of the Cheng clan. It was clear how much importance they attached to Ling Han. Of course, they had still not gone all out, because the ancestor of the Cheng clan had broken past the severing mundane tier not too long ago. He had not come, which meant that the Cheng clan thought that 7 severing mundane tier grand elders were enough to suppress Ling Han. "Insolent maniac, get out here," one of the clan elders of the Cheng clan shouted loudly. He was ranked 3rd in the hierarchy of clan elders. Meanwhile, the 5th elder looked at Cheng Zilong, who had been suppressed, and couldn't help but show an expression of heartache. That was because he was Cheng Zilong's direct ancestor, and Cheng Zilong was also the future hope of his branch of the clan, and he hoped that the latter would inherit his position in future. He hurriedly descended, and stretched out a hand which he placed on the great rock, wanting to move the rock away, and then save the trapped hostage. At first, Cheng Zilong was already weary from his tribulations, and even his pained cries were as soft as the hum of insects, but when he saw that his ancestor was here, he involuntarily became very excited, and actually became energetic again. He called out, "Ancestor, save me. Save me quickly. Also, you must kill that vile criminal, you must tear him to pieces." He had actually been forced to suffer this hellish torture for 3 days. He had to get his revenge. He swore that he would never become human again if he couldn't get his vengeance. Ling Han had already come out, his arms crossed over his chest. He was simply leaning against the door frame like that, and did not make a move to stop them. Instead, he stated calmly, "Looks like there is some problem with your brains. I have already said that Cheng Yifeng is to kneel with every step as he makes his way here." The third elder glanced at Ling Han in contempt, and declared, "Have you devoured the courage of an immortal dragon, to actually dare become enemies with our Cheng clan? To answer a question that I did not ask, looks like I should teach you a lesson," Ling Han said leisurely. "Ah." On the other hand, the fifth elder's expression changed drastically. At first, he had been very casually holding onto that rock, but when he used strength, he discovered that his rock seemed to have been joined with the ground, and could not be moved at all. He couldn't even raise it the slightest bit. Naturally, he was greatly shocked. He had not realized at all that this rock seemed to be a treasure. How could it be as heavy as a planet? No, it was even heavier than a planet. With the strength of a severing mundane tier Grand Elder, it was no big deal for them to lift a planet. The other 6 clan elders also discovered his strange reaction, and couldn't help but turn to look towards him. The third elder frowned, and said, "Seventh, what are you doing?" He was very displeased. "Our military morale is presently high, and you are actually groaning there. Are you getting constipation? It's very embarrassing." I can't move it," the fifth elder exclaimed, his face flushed. He was practically dying from the embarrassment. "What?" The other 6 clan elders were all in disbelief. There were still a few patches of moss on this rock, so it clearly could not be some kind of precious tool, but rather was just an ordinary rock. "You actually can't even lift a rock? Have you gone crazy, to actually speak such stupid words? Let me." The 6th elder leaped out. Their ranking was according to the time that they had broken through to the severing mundane tier, but some people had surpassed those before them despite a later head start, and it was not definite that the others might have a higher cultivation level. For example, the 5th elder was only a 3rd severance, but the 6th elder was a 4th severance. The 5th elder gave way, and the 6th elder took his place, yet the result was the same. No matter how flushed and red the 6th elder's face became, in fact, he even released a fart from the force he was exerting, the great rock still did not move the slightest. At this, the 7 clan elders' expressions all changed to shock. They knew that this was not because there was something wrong with the 5th elder's brain, but rather that the problem lay with this rock. Cheng Zilong was not crying out anymore. He was just watching dumbly, his eyes unfocused, as if he had lost his wits. "Let me," Cheng Wuya said, his expression dark. He was the 10th elder of the Cheng clan, and was also the strongest of the present severing mundane tiers. In the future, it was highly possible that he could break through to the dividing soul tier. Thus, though his ranking was last, his weight in the clan was powerful. "10th, you do it," the other 6 people said. Cheng Wuya did not stretch out his hand to lift the rock. Instead, he took a deep breath, and began building up power for a celestial technique. He was going to directly send this rock flying with a strike. This time, Cheng Zilong was instantly scared. Immediately, he became incredibly agitated instead of his original dumbstruck state where he was looking like he had nothing left to live for. He was practically waving his limbs madly. "10th elder, I'm still underneath. I'm still underneath." Under the barrage of celestial techniques, he would definitely be destroyed and turned to scraps. Yet Cheng Wuya acted as if he had not seen anything. Now, it was not the question of the life or death of a clansman, but the pride of the Cheng clan. He couldn't even do anything to a rock. This was unbelievably humiliating. Explode! He suddenly shot out a punch, and a celestial seal bloomed from his fist, its might soaring to the heavens. The other 6 clan elders were all secretly astonished. Though they were all severing mundane tiers, Wuya was still stronger than them, and it was not just by a bit, either. That was completely displayed without reservation with this strike. Boom! The force of the punch surged past, yet a celestial light glowed slightly on the rock, as if it could not be touched by anything. To say nothing of the fact that the rock was completely undamaged, even Cheng Zilong, who had been suppressed underneath, was also completely unscathed. This. The 7 clan elders of the Cheng clan were well and truly shocked at this. Chapter 2165, again. Let's try it together, the 8th elder said, his voice slightly shaky. This was too frightening. Even the 10th elder making a move had absolutely no effect. If this rock was a treasure, there would be nothing that they could say, nor would they be so terrified, but the crux of the matter was that this was an ordinary rock, and that was why it was so terrifying. All right. They were not willing to give up. Even a boulder had this kind of might, so this had to be something done by Ling Han. If even the joined forces of the 7 of them could do nothing, that meant that all of them added together were still no match for Ling Han, so it would be better for them to flee as fast as possible. They joined forces, and with the command of the 3rd elder, all 7 of them moved simultaneously. Boom, a terrifying light blasted into that rock, creating a dazzling brilliance. Wang, the rock also glowed slightly, which seemed negligible, yet had completely blocked the attacks of all 7 severing mundane tier grand elders. The 7 clan elders were all pale. Ling Han had not even moved at all, and merely a rock was enough for them to know what being invincible meant. Run! The 7 of them turned around simultaneously, wanting to flee quickly. What made them feel fortunate was that Ling Han had not moved. He was still leaning against the door, arms crossed over his chest, with "I have ignored you all completely" written over his face. We'll just allow you to act reckless. When we return to the Cheng clan, we'll ask our ancestor to come and subdue you. Xiao, Xiao, Xiao. They had instantly rushed to the valley's mouth, yet their eyes blurred, and they had actually returned into the valley, and were still where they had set out from. This. What was going on? The 7 of them were all greatly shocked, but were running even faster now. They had come once more to the valley mouth, but when they took another step forwards, Xiao, their sight blurred once more, and they returned to the position that they had set out from in the valley. They had to be seeing things. They were about to cry. Having experienced the same thing twice in a row, it absolutely could not have been because a change had taken place in the structure of the heaven and earth, but was rather a result produced by man-made means, and this kind of person who did it, could only be Ling Han. One man, arms crossed over his chest, leaning against the door, and he still managed to play around with 7 severing mundane tier grand elders in the palm of his hand? Exactly what kind of monster are you? Run again. The 7 people rushed forth once more, as if the chill in their hearts could only be reduced in this manner. Thus, Cheng Zilong was fortunate enough to witness this scene's even grand elders endlessly rushed towards the valley mouth, and just arrived when Xuan, they instantly appeared back in their original positions. It was like they were not even humans, but merely chess pieces, and could only be controlled and manipulated. His mouth was half gaping. At this point, the shock he was feeling had already suppressed his physical pain. Of course, this was only a short while. Very soon, he began groaning again. However, his throat had long since become hoarse from his pained moans, so this sound was pitifully soft. After failing successively for over a dozen times, the 7 clan elders finally stopped running. They knew that this was merely pointless effort, and would only serve as a joke for others. What do you want? The 3rd elder looked at Ling Han, putting on a calm act, but his trembling legs gave him away. It could not be helped, Ling Han was powerful to the extent that he could not guess, and was perhaps even stronger than their ancestor. Ling Han was surprised, and said, "Are you guys stupid? You came here all aggressive, and now you turn around and ask me what I want? What I want is very simple. However much of the Ling clan's wealth the Cheng clan has taken, all of it has to be wholly thrown back up. Additionally, have Cheng Yifeng kneel and come here to meet me. Do you not understand these few words? He then shook his head, and said, "Forget it. I can't rest assured with your intelligence, so you guys had best just stay here then." He waved a hand, and 7 rocks flew over. The largest was as large as a millstone, while the smallest was only the size of a fist. Ling Han gave a casual toss, and the 7 rocks descended on the 7 clan elders of the Cheng clan. Pang, pang, pang. The 7 of them instantly sprawled out on the ground underneath the weight while a rock was pressing down on each of them. And whether it was the size of a millstone, or the size of a fist, every single person could not move under their weight. The rocks were merely a medium. What was important was the regulations that Ling Han had placed on them. Ah! The 7 severing mundane tier grand elders all began screaming in pain. This was being crushed by regulations, and no matter how strong-willed they were, it was impossible that they could bear it. Ling Han shook his head, and returned indoors. He naturally would not take a battle of this level to heart. He was only drawing it out like this for the sake of his family. On the other side, in the Cheng clan. By now, a whole 2 days had already passed since the 7 clan elders of Cheng clan had set out. For a severing mundane tier, they would have easily exchanged a number of blows in 30 minutes, so how could it be that there was still not the slightest news even until now? Furthermore, the people the clan had sent out as scouts had not returned, either. It was not just one group, but all the groups they had sent out had disappeared, as if the Peach Blossom Origins was a bottomless pit. The longer the wait, the more unease the ancestor of the Cheng clan felt. A servant suddenly came, and reported, "Lord Clan Leader, the clan leader of the Jing clan seeks an audience." Jing Kebang? The clan leader of the Cheng clan faltered for a moment, and then suddenly burst out into laughter. "He's here just in time. Jing Kebang wants an alliance through marriage with our Cheng clan, so it would do no harm for me to drag him into this matter as well so he can scout out the Ling clan. Invite him in. No, check that. I will go and meet him myself." The clan leader of the Cheng clan stood up, and personally went out to greet him. A while later, he had invited 2 people back into the main hall. Out of the 2 newcomers, one of them was a white-browed and white-bearded elder, who looked kind and genial, while the other was a youthful young man, looking extremely shy, as if he would blush with just one word. "Brother Cheng, have you considered the suggestion I proposed the last time?" that white-bearded old man asked. He was the clan leader of Jing clan, Jing Kebang. The Jing clan was a 2-star force. Originally, they were much superior to the Cheng clan, but as the clan leader of the Cheng clan advanced into the dividing soul tier, the 2 great clans were now standing as equals, and due to a certain pressure, the Jing clan very much wanted to form an alliance through marriage with the Cheng clan so they could unite and oppose another force. The clan leader of the Cheng clan pretended to ponder silently, and only answered after a while. "I shall not deceive Brother Jing. I am presently being troubled by a certain matter, and do not wish to consider other issues for the moment." "May I know what Brother Cheng is being troubled by?" Jing Kebang asked, sneering inwardly. Chances were high that the Cheng clan wanted to ask for some benefits from him. The clan leader of the Cheng clan thought for a while, and then related the matter of Ling Yuan and Cheng Yifeng. However, in his words, it naturally became Ling Yuan that was being unreasonable, causing Cheng Yifeng to demand a divorce, but Ling Yuan's family was very overbearing, and he was very troubled. If he used force, it would harm their peaceful relations, but if he did not, he could not bear their outrageous acts either. That's simple. Jing Kebang laughed loudly. "Come, I will go with Brother Cheng. I'll play the bad guy, and you can play the good guy, and intimidate that unreasonable family completely." "All right." The clan leader of the Cheng clan was just waiting for him to say this. "Let's go." This time, the clan leader of the Cheng clan had not brought others, and merely set out to the Peach Blossom Origins with Jing Kebang and that young clansman of the Jing clan. This young man was Jing Dong, the most outstanding among the younger generation of the Jing clan, and also the direct person involved in this alliance through marriage with the Cheng clan. He had been cultivating for less than 10 million years, and had already successfully advanced into the severing mundane tier, which was extremely extraordinary. The three of them moved as fast as lightning, and in a mere 30 minutes, they had arrived at the mouth of the Valley of the Peach Blossom Origins. The clan leader of the Cheng clan's expression immediately turned solemn. All the people he had sent had not returned, which caused a great wariness of this valley to rise up in him. In fact, he did not even dare to step in easily. Jing Kebang, though, had none of these reservations. With a leap, he already arrived inside the valley. Fuck, what was going on here? Jing Kebang was dumbfounded because there were a total of 8 people sprawled out inside the valley, and they all had a larger or smaller rock weighing down on them, while moans were released from their mouths. More importantly, all these rocks looked incredibly ordinary. Some were even as small as a fist, and even that could cause a person to groan under their weight. Chapter 2166, Scared Away. Jing Kebang's first reaction was that these people were joking around, but the problem here was that he actually knew some of them. They were all the clan elders of the Cheng clan. The last time he paid a visit to the Cheng clan, these people had been the reception party. And aside from one of them, all the others were severing mundane tiers. Are you guys playing house here? What's so fun about having a large group of people deliberately having a rock pressing down on them and groaning there? The clan leader of the Cheng clan had also followed him in, and his expression involuntarily changed dramatically. He had thought of countless possibilities, but the only thing he had not imagined was a scene like this. This, just what kind of elite was hidden in this valley, actually being capable of forcing Cheng Wuya and the others to this extent? Furthermore, these rocks were extremely ordinary at a glance, but why were they able to suppress these severing mundane tier grand elders to the point that they could only moan, and could not get back up? Hee, Brother Cheng, you seem to owe me an explanation. Jing Kebang was not the slightest bit stupid. Otherwise, how could he have possibly become a dividing soul tier, and he would not have possibly become the leader of his clan either. He could tell there was something off about this at first glance. It was not like what the Cheng clan leader had told him, about how they refrained from using force in view of their relations. Were these severing mundane tiers all incompetent? The clan leader of the Cheng clan stated solemnly, Brother Jing, there is possibly a great enemy within the valley, so we must not be careless. Fuck you. Jing Kebang cursed internally. Originally, this was something that had absolutely nothing to do with him, and the reason he had wanted to ally with the Cheng clan through marriage was so that he could pull the Cheng clan onto their side so they could unite against the Lu clan. A second dividing soul tier had emerged from the Lu clan, and the Lu and Jing clan had been feuding for generations. If the Lu clan prospered, it would mean death for the Jing clan. If they did not seek external help, they would only be waiting for their demise. But they hadn't even gotten their external help yet, and he had to first deal with a person or force that he was not familiar with, so how could he not feel anger? However, the threat of the Lu clan was genuine, and the Jing clan definitely had to obtain the assistance of the Cheng clan. Fine, he could only help them. Who is in charge in this valley? Please present yourself for a meeting, the clan leader of the Cheng clan called out loudly. Cheng Rong, you ungrateful traitor, you actually still have the face to come and see me? Ling Dongxing's voice rang out. He strode out, his face bearing an expression of great fury. His daughter had actually been divorced, which naturally caused him, her father, to feel uncontrollable fury, and he wanted nothing more than to kill all the members of the Cheng clan. Cheng Rong was the clan leader of the Cheng clan, and hearing Ling Dongxing address him directly by name, he couldn't help but show an expression of anger. In the past, Ling Dongxing was worthy of being friends with him because there was a rock palace backing the Ling clan up, but now the rock palace itself had become history, and Ling Dongxing still wanted to act as his equal? He was only a mere Genesis tier, and was even worth less than nothing in the celestial realm. Ha ha ha. Jing Kebang laughed loudly. What a great joke. A mere Genesis tier actually dares to be outrageously brazen. Brother Cheng, you are really allowing others to trample on your dignity. Lord Cheng, why don't you allow me to act, and suppress this man who does not know what is good for him? Jing Dong said proudly, and felt that the Cheng clan was really too stupid and cowardly, actually letting a Genesis tier strut around in front of dividing soul tiers like this. Cheng Rong's expression was livid. He had internal reservations. Ling Dongxing naturally could not possibly subdue 7 great severing mundane tier grand elders. There had to be another mysterious elite in this valley. As long as the latter did not appear, he could not rest assured. The unknown was the most terrifying. Humph, haven't you played around enough? He moved, and grabbed at the rocks on the 8 people sprawled out on the ground. With him controlling his origin power, it turned into 8 giant hands. Each massive hand held onto a rock, wanting to lift them, but his expression immediately changed in shock because the weight of these rocks had far surpassed his expectations. He could only lift them the slightest bit. Cheng Yuan hurriedly withdrew the other 7 gigantic hands. 8 streaks of origin power combined into one, and he used all his effort to lift a single rock. Ka, ka, ka. The rock moved slightly, but it was very negligible. At this, Jing Kebang's expression changed drastically as well. Quickly, he shouted at Jing Dong, "Let's go." Jing Dong did not know what was good for him. Wasn't it just a mere Genesis tier? What need was there for him to feel any reservations? He was going to argue, and said, "Lord Clan Leader. Shut up, and follow me." Jing Kebang moved directly, grabbing Jing Dong, then soared into the skies, and fled. After leaving the valley, he breathed a sigh of relief internally, and hurriedly increased his speed. No one had come out in pursuit of them, that was good. Brother Jing! Brother Jing! Cheng Rong shouted loudly, but Jing Kebang was only running even faster. Cheng Wuya and the others were all pale. At first, they had thought that now that Cheng Rong had come, he would immediately be able to save them from this torture, but the fact was that Cheng Rong actually almost collapsed in weariness just from moving a single rock the slightest bit. What kind of gap in power was this? It should be known that Ling Han had only leisurely moved several rocks over. He had not cast any kind of formation on them, or refined them for several days and nights before doing so. Their bodies were all trembling. They were completely unable to imagine Ling Han's true strength. Cheng Rong's eyes flickered, and he suddenly turned around and fled. This valley had a supreme elite, and it was definitely no one he could stand against. Xiao, his figure flickered, and just when it looked like he was about to run out of the valley, his sight blurred, and he returned to his original spot. What was going on here? Was there some kind of formation here? Cheng Wuya and the others were also incredibly astonished. It was one thing for them to be endlessly lost, but why was it the same for Cheng Rong as well? After a few consecutive attempts, Cheng Rong knew that it was impossible for him to escape, and thus stood still. His eyes turned towards Ling Dongxing, a twisted expression on his face. He was going to capture this person, and perhaps he could use him as a hostage. In that case, he might be able to escape. He suddenly pounced towards Ling Dongxing, and then stretched out his hand, grabbing at Ling Dongxing's neck. Just when it looked like he was about to grasp his neck, he felt his sight blur, and he once again returned to his original spot. He was internally shocked, and knew that with that elite here, there was absolutely no possibility that he could capture Ling Dongxing. Brother Ling. He turned to look at Ling Dongxing again, and became extremely polite. No matter the case, we are still in-laws, so we should help each other, and endure difficult times together. Endure your sister. Ling Dongxing waved a fist, and delivered a punch straight at him. Pang! Cheng Rong wanted to dodge, but he immediately discovered that his body was completely restrained. It was difficult for him to even raise a finger. Thus, this fist landed solidly on him, and sent him flying upwards. Ling Dongxing did not let him off now that he had the advantage, and shot forth again, thrashing him madly. Cheng Rong howled in pain. The power in his body had been sealed off without his awareness, and he could only use his own physique to take the attacks head-on. However, he was not one who focused on cultivating the physique. As a mere dividing soul tier, he could only cultivate his physique to an extent that was slightly superior to the Genesis tier, so it would not reach the point that he would be killed by a Genesis tier, but it would still be extremely painful. Pang, pang, pang. Ling Dongxing vented all his fury, endlessly barraging Cheng Rong with blows, and causing Cheng Rong to yell continuously in pain. At the same time, the latter was also extremely furious. As a powerful dividing soul tier, he was actually beaten so harshly by a Genesis tier. This was a great humiliation to him. But now, his only thought was how to resolve this crisis. If that mysterious elite had really wanted to kill him, there would have been no need to go to so much trouble, right? Thus, since he was suffering such physical pain, he was sure that his life would definitely not be at risk. After beating Cheng Rong for about an hour, Ling Dongxing finally stopped. He had just about vented enough of his fury. "Where is Cheng Yifeng?" Ling Dongxing asked. Beating Cheng Rong up was only to vent his anger. What was the most important was still to solve the problem of his daughter's marriage. He could not allow his daughter to become a widow or something of the like, after all. At the Cheng clan, Cheng Rong hurriedly answered. All this had begun because of Cheng Yifeng, and it clearly could only be ended by him. Chapter 2167, Earnestly Thoughtful. Make him kneel with every step here. Ling Dongxing exclaimed through gritted teeth. He actually dared to divorce his daughter. Fuck, in the past, it had been Cheng Yifeng that had married above his station, and now that the Cheng clan had obtained great gains from them, while the Ling clan had lost any value for exploitation, he had discarded his daughter without hesitation. Preposterous. Yes. Yes. At present, Cheng Rong only wished that he himself could escape. As for Cheng Yifeng, how could he possibly take him to heart? To say nothing of merely crawling on his knees here, he would not be concerned even if they wanted to tear him into pieces. Then scram. Ling Dongxing shot out a kick. Furthermore, 3 days later, bring all that your Cheng clan has obtained from our Ling clan all these years and come back here. Even if there is just one less star stone, it will not be forgiven. Cheng Rong nodded quickly. As long as his life could be saved, it was fine even if it meant selling off the entire Cheng clan. It was enough as long as he was still alive. A dividing soul tier elite was absolutely capable of rebuilding a powerful force. Ling Han appeared, and clapped Cheng Rong lightly twice, sending a few streaks of power into his body. Don't even think of fleeing. I have planted some kind of restriction in your body, and you have to come back 3 days later to have me unravel it. Otherwise, you had best already found a good coffin for yourself. Cheng Rong's body immediately trembled. He had indeed planned to bring the elites of the Cheng clan, and flee as far as they could, but with this restriction from Ling Han, he naturally did not dare to have the slightest idea. Go on. Ling Han patted his shoulder, as if they were good friends. Cheng Rong was despondent, and knew that the Cheng clan was really trapped this time. Ling clan should be also a dividing soul tier, he was sure of this fact. But the aura the other party exuded was stronger than his own by who knew how many times over. Without even appearing, he had dealt with him in a way that he did not dare to have even the slightest temper. This gap in power between them was like the distance between heaven and earth. He did not know how he had made his way back to the Cheng clan, right until everyone had surrounded him. Only then did he shudder, and regain his wits. Ancestor, what's the matter? A middle-aged man approached. He was incredibly handsome, and bore a devilish smile. He was Cheng Yifeng, known as the Lady Killer. It was not because he would kill women, but rather because his charms were too great. There was not one woman that could resist him. Pa! Cheng Rong simply sent him a slap, causing Cheng Yifeng to spin 7 to 8 times from the blow before finally stopping. Ancestor? Cheng Yifeng's eyes widened, with him looking extremely innocent. What had he done to anger the ancestor? He hadn't done anything, right? He had only seen how the ancestor looked absent-minded, and deliberately came forward to curry favor. He had not thought that his flattery would have landed so completely offside. Cheng Rong suppressed his anger, and shouted at Cheng Yifeng, tomorrow, you will go to the Peach Blossom Origins, and pick up your wife. Cheng Yifeng appeared very astonished. Previously, wasn't it the clan that had commanded that he was to split up with Ling Yuan? Why was the ancestor now asking him to bring Ling Yuan back? Kneel with every step, your sincerity has to be adequate. Cheng Rong continued. What? Cheng Yifeng almost jumped. Not only was he to bring Ling Yuan back, he would have to make his way there on his knees. He was a heartthrob, and every woman saw him as her dream guy. If he were to really kneel the entire way there, what woman would throw herself into his arms in future? Just do as I say, do you want to die? Cheng Rong shot out another slap at him. It was natural that he would not be the slightest bit affected by Cheng Yifeng's charms. Cheng Yifeng could only nod. The ancestor was the heaven and earth for them, and every word from his mouth was a golden rule, and definitely could not be disobeyed. After Cheng Yifeng was dismissed, Cheng Rong was naturally occupied by a lot of matters. Who knew how many benefits they had gained from the Ling clan all these years, and even selling off the entire Cheng clan would not be enough for repayment, but every slight bit that could be paid back counted. At least, it would allow Ling Han to see that he was being sincere, right? When the second day was close to ending, a person arrived outside the Peach Blossom Origins, kneeling with every step he took, and advancing towards the valley at a very slow pace. That was Cheng Yifeng. He naturally could not possibly journey the whole way from Cheng clan to here on his knees. Otherwise, it would not be enough even if he was given 10 to 15 days' time. Instead, it was when he was closing in on the Peach Blossom Origins that he began to kneel with every step. Husband. Ling Yuan saw this, and immediately wanted to leap out, yet Ling Han stretched out his arm and blocked her, pulling her back. What a joke, Cheng Yifeng wanted to bluff the rest of the way just by kneeling this little bit of distance. Brother. Ling Yuan's personality was slightly soft, and when she saw how her beloved husband's face was filled with love, she had completely forgiven him, and looked at Ling Han pleadingly. Ling Han was unmoved. If Cheng Yifeng was not taught a serious lesson this time round, he naturally would not remember it deeply in his heart. He tapped out lightly, and Cheng Yifeng immediately showed an expression of pain. That was because he suddenly discovered that his body felt heavier than 10,000 jin, and he couldn't even stand up at all. Crawl your way here, and you will have passed. Otherwise, Ling Han pointed at Cheng Wuya and the others who were still being suppressed in the valley. They will be your example. At first, Cheng Yifeng wanted to continue to plead for forgiveness from Ling Yuan, but looking at the agonized expressions of Cheng Wuya and the others, he immediately shuddered, and dismissed this idea completely. He had best just crawl obediently. He earnestly crawled towards the valley, but with boundless weight pressing down on him, his bones were cracking from the pressure, almost as if they were about to break. Large beads of cold sweat endlessly dripped, and he was feeling great agony. He was not anyone with strong willpower, and very soon, he was sprawled out on the ground, unable to move the slightest bit further. Ling Yuan's heart ached from watching, but she was being restrained by her parents, so it was impossible for her to rush forwards. Firstly, Ling Han wanted to teach Cheng Yifeng a lesson, and also meant to drill him. Since he had already become his brother-in-law, with many children, and even grandchildren, this was not just raw rice being cooked, but completely burnt. Thus, since this was a fact that could no longer be changed, Ling Han thus could only polish this stubborn rock. At the very least, this rock could be a bit shinier, and have some use, unlike now, when all he had was a pretty face and a mouth that knew to speak words that would gain him the pleasure of women. Cheng Yifeng was sprawled out for a long time, and seeing that Ling Yuan had still not appeared, he could only struggle and get back up. The weight was not something that would disappear just because he was sprawled out. He, too, wished to end this torture as soon as possible. 2 days passed, and he had just barely crawled 1/3 of the distance. At this moment, Cheng Rong returned. He took out a considerable number of spatial god tools. Each spatial god tool was filled with cultivation resources, which included alchemical pills, star stones, and godly metal. He knew that this was far from enough, and made his explanations to Ling Dongxing earnestly. He had indeed completely emptied the entire Cheng clan, and would pay the rest back gradually. He would definitely not renege on the rest. Ling Dongxing looked towards Ling Han, and asked, "Honor, what do you say?" His son was the pillar of support of the entire family. Ling Dongxing was willing to have Ling Han make the decision in this matter. Ling Han smiled, and replied, "That would depend on the performance of this brother-in-law of mine. If he can crawl his way here, then he will still be my brother-in-law, and we will be family. Matters of the family naturally can be easily negotiated." Cheng Rong understood what he meant. If Cheng Yifeng could not crawl here, then he would not be Ling Han's brother-in-law, and in that case, they would not be family. Ling Han would definitely not have any further reservations. Yifeng definitely can do it. He hurriedly expressed on behalf of Cheng Yifeng, thinking that even if he broke his bones in his crawling, he still had to crawl his way here no matter what. Ling Han merely smiled in response. For the sake of this younger sister, he was being earnestly thoughtful. Chapter 2168, Sealing the Town. Cheng Yifeng spent a total of 7 days to crawl to the valley. Amid his disappointment, Ling Han also felt a slight sense of gratitude. This was because he hadn't expected Cheng Yifeng to be so useless. The latter had actually spent a whopping 7 days to crawl to this place. In the end, however, his persistence had paid off. This meant that he still had some redeeming features. Even so, Ling Han didn't let Cheng Yifeng off so lightly. Only after giving him some more lessons, and making him completely obedient to Ling Yuan did he finally breathe a sigh of relief. Elsewhere, the Empress was also giving special lessons to Ling Yuan, teaching her how to become more assertive. There was no need to doubt the Empress' influence. She possessed a charisma and demeanor that would naturally cause one to submit and listen to her words. This charisma worked on both men and women. With the Empress lessons, Ling Yuan finally became a tiny bit more assertive. Although she failed to reach Ling Han's expectations, this was still much better than before. The Cheng clan naturally had to pay up as well. Even though Ling Han had no intentions of destroying the Cheng clan, this clan was truly an unpleasant one. Thus, Ling Han showed no mercy either, exploiting them as much as he could. This caused the members of the Cheng clan to grumble in complaint. However, whom could they blame? Almost everything that they enjoyed now had come from the Ling clan. Moreover, they had even exploited the Ling clan in a vicious manner when the latter had lost their power. Thus, Ling Han was already showing great mercy by not destroying the Cheng clan. As an uncle, Ling Han naturally wasn't stingy to Ling Yuan's 3 sons, his nephews. He gifted them a great number of cultivation resources. He was the Alchemy Emperor, and he had more so become a 4-star Grandmaster. As such, even the alchemical pills that he casually refined were extremely mystical and beneficial. However, it was a shame that one needed to rely on their own abilities to reach the severing mundane tier. Ling Han would need to become a celestial king, and possess some kind of mystical power of heaven and earth before he could forcefully help others reach the severing mundane tier. Moreover, those who reached the severing mundane tier in such a manner wouldn't possess much battle prowess. Their cultivation would simply be an empty shell. Anyhow, Ling Han wasn't too worried about this. As long as one reached the severing mundane tier, they would possess a limitless lifespan. When Ling Han eventually became a heavenly venerate, and transcended this heaven and earth, he would then possess the ability to resolve others' immortals' tribulation. At that time, those beside him would also become truly undying. Ling Han was already courageous and invincible, and with his generous gifts, he naturally became a revered figure in the eyes of Ling Yuan's 3 sons, as well as their grandchildren and future generations. They viewed him as a divine deity. Ling Han had initially planned to bring his parents with him, yet Ling Dongxing and his mother both said that they had no great ambitions. Moreover, they had already become accustomed to living here, so they didn't want to leave. Not only did they express such feelings, even Ling Yuan also expressed much the same feeling. After living in relative peace and quiet for 10,000 years or so, they already had no ambition to adventure and take risks. Ling Han mulled over this for a moment, and he ultimately didn't try to persuade them otherwise. With his understanding of Shang Jiwei, she wouldn't stoop as low as to kidnapping his parents to threaten him. Moreover, with his mighty name, neither the Cheng clan nor the Jing clan would dare to do anything risky. In the end, Ling Han decided to set off with Helian Xuan and the other women. Hu Niu was naturally extremely dissatisfied with this. She had yet to get rid of the other bewitching women such as the Empress and bewitching Maiden Ro, yet more bewitching women had now appeared. This was far too detestable. Anyhow, she was simply throwing a small tantrum and showing some jealousy. She would be fine in no time. Meanwhile, the Lunar King and Xuan also expressed their desire to adventure with Ling Han. If they had the chance, they also wanted to enter the ancient realm, since Xuan's home was located there. As for the Lunar King, she had never been to the ancient realm before. However, it was a shame that only those at or above the immortal palace tier could send people down into the ancient realm. Ling Han didn't possess such a cultivation at this moment, so this could only be discussed at a later time. In any case, he didn't feel much attachment to the ancient realm. He had brought most of his friends and family to the celestial realm, so if he wanted to visit them, he could simply travel to the eastern celestial realm. After staying with his parents and sister for several days, Ling Han bade them farewell, and set off for the Heavenly Saint Palace. He was someone who couldn't stay put for too long. He lived to pursue the Heavenly Tao, and he would also die for the Heavenly Tao. Although the Heavenly Saint Palace was also in the Rock Heaven, it was located very far away from the Rock Palace. If they wanted to head over, it would take them around 20 days or so. However, there were many transference portals in the Rock Heaven. Intra-realm transference portals were extremely difficult to construct, so only 9th Heaven celestial kings who had mastered the element of space, such as the Rock Source Beast, could construct them. As such, these transference portals only existed inside the Rock Palace. Right now, they were being controlled by the Four Seas Palace. Because of the Rock Source Beast, there also existed a great number of lower-level transference portals in the Rock Heaven. These transference portals allowed people to easily move around the Rock Heaven, saving them a great deal of time. As an 8-star force, the Heavenly Saint Palace naturally had such a transference portal as well. Ling Han and the others decided to take advantage of these transference portals. After all, when one could slack off, who would still want to rely on their own 2 legs? Especially since there was no benefit to doing so. The closest transference portal to them was located in Azure Sand Village. If they used this transference portal, they could directly arrive at Red Blossom Village, which was located at the foot of the Heavenly Saint Palace. Of course, they couldn't directly teleport into the Heavenly Saint Palace. After all, how could an 8-star force allow random people to enter? It only took Ling Han and the others a few hours to reach Azure Sand Village. However, they were astonished to discover people standing guard outside the small village. Those entering the village were all subject to strict searches. This was especially the case if they possessed spatial god tools, which had to be handed over for examination. Humph. You said you handed all of your spatial god tools over? Then what's this? A person in front of Ling Han was being searched, and the guards had discovered a spatial god tool hidden on him. Lord, this lowly person forgot about this one, the person said. He was an old man of small stature, and he was currently wearing an obsequious smile. You dare to be dishonest? Confiscated, the guard said in a cold voice. He started to put the spatial god tool away. Give it back, the old man shouted as he lunged over. It was as if he were about to fight with his life. Kill him. 7 of the guards immediately stepped forward, thrusting their spears at the old man. Ling Han humphed, and his monarch-tier aura instantly shot forth. Pa. The spears of the 7 guards immediately clattered to the ground. The guards were astounded, and they involuntarily turned around to stare at Ling Han. Their faces were filled with fright. This person was extremely powerful, he was far more powerful than them. However, the 7 guards quickly composed themselves, and their leader said, Sir, I urge you to mind your own business. We're disciples of the Dragon Universe Palace, and we're currently under orders to capture several criminals. So, I urge you to obediently cooperate. Otherwise, you face death. Dragon Universe Palace? Ling Han looked toward Hunyo. He had genuinely never heard of this force before. Hunyo pondered for a moment before saying, Oh, it's a small immortal palace tier force. Nyo coincidentally heard about it before. Ling Han chuckled upon hearing this. This immortal palace tier force was truly audacious. They actually dared to seal a village, and attempt to capture people in the rock heaven? Didn't they know that they would easily come across powerful beings? For example, Hunyo, the young imperial empress of the rock palace. Of course, she had already lost her status now. However, if Ling Han wanted, he could easily take advantage of the influence of the Four Seas Palace. Right now, the Four Seas Palace was the true leader of the rock heaven. This is still no reason for you to use a public reason to gain private benefits, Ling Han said in a calm voice. These people were clearly taking advantage of this opportunity to gain wealth for themselves. Whenever they discovered valuable items in the spatial god tools, they would retrieve and take them. Moreover, they would directly kill those who dared to hide their spatial god tools, such as with the old man. They were as ruthless as could be. Are you dissatisfied with the actions of the Dragon Universe Palace? Someone said with a cold chuckle. They looked over, only to see a man in azure walking out from the village. His dividing soul tier aura swept through the surroundings. Chapter 2169, Sun in Danger. The man in azure stood with his hands clasped behind his back. He wore a domineering expression, and his eyes were slanted as he peered down at Ling Han. However, they involuntarily lit up when he swept his gaze across the Empress and the others. They were such beautiful women. And there was more than one of them. Each one of them was beautiful enough to make his heart flutter. Emperor tiers and monarch tiers possessed extremely powerful self-control, and this was because they had a lofty ambition that they yearned to achieve. Thus, they naturally wouldn't spend too much time on trivial enjoyment. They would simply go with the flow, and they would seldom seek any pleasure. Conversely, the less talented one was, the more they would be drawn to material matters and beauty. This was because they already had no room for improvement. Thus, their only goal was to seek pleasure. This man in azure belonged to the latter group. It was thanks to luck that he had even been able to reach the dividing soul tier. In the past, he had received a 9th refinement alchemical pill from a 5-star alchemist, and it was thanks to this that he had opened the doors to the dividing soul tier. However, he was unable to advance any further. Even so, the dividing soul tier was far superior to the severing mundane tier, so this person couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction and superiority. After advancing to the dividing soul tier, countless people now had to look up to him. "Are you not going to kneel?" the man in azure chided. A cold smile tugged at the corners of his lips. He was extremely eager for Ling Han to resist, as that would give him the excuse to capture him. After all, the Dragon Universe Palace also needed to maintain its face. If word got out that he was forcefully snatching women from others, he would become the target of criticism from everyone. At that time, the Dragon Universe Palace would also be forced to expel him. In fact, he might even face severe punishment from the Dragon Universe Palace. Ling Han chuckled, and asked, "You want to die?" "How audacious," the man in azure said with a frown. However, he was feeling ecstatic on the inside. "Go on, continue to seek death. You actually dare to threaten a member of the Dragon Universe Palace? You're seeking death." "Pa!" Ling Han lashed out with his palm, causing a devastating gust of wind to sweep over, instantly engulfing the man in azure. When the gust of wind passed, only a set of teeth remained, which then lightly clattered to the ground. "The consequence of not knowing how to speak," Ling Han said in a calm voice. He was well aware of the man in azure's thoughts, and it was because of this that he showed no mercy at all. The 7 guards went pale with fright. That was Lord Mingtong, a young soul elite. Yet, he had actually been killed with a single strike. "As for you people," Ling Han swept his gaze across the 7 guards before continuing, "I'll let you off the hook this time. However, don't you dare dream about committing any more crimes in the future." With a soft clap, 7 bursts of energy instantly shot forth, crippling the cultivation of the 7 guards. A dazed expression instantly spread across the faces of the 7 guards. Without their cultivation, what else could they do? Ling Han naturally paid no heed to them. He strode toward the village. Hunyo giggled as she ran over, raising her leg to launch 7 kicks. "Pa, pa, pa." The 7 guards instantly shot into the sky and disappeared into the distance. "Remember to bring some gifts when you return," she said, placing a hand above her brows, and pretending to peer into the distance. The others involuntarily smiled. Hunyo was just as mischievous as always. However, just as they were about to enter the village, they saw someone scooting out from the dense forest outside the village. They waved their arms as they ran over, shouting, "Beautiful sister." "Huh?" Ling Han couldn't help but feel surprised. This was because the person was a woman, one that he recognized. She was none other than Chen Xuan, his future daughter-in-law. What a coincidence. He had come across this girl here. Ling Han stopped, and the other women also stopped. Apart from Hunyo, the Empress, and bewitching Maiden Ro, none of the other women were familiar with Chen Xuan. Thus, Helian Xuanxue and the others all thought that this was another lover of Ling Han's. They instantly became alert. They didn't want Ling Han's love toward them to be diluted even further. "Sister." Chen Xuan ran over, not caring about the fact that she was actually older than most of the women here, as she referred to them as sisters. She stroked their jade-like hands, and her eyes were filled with stars. Ling Han couldn't help but find this strange. His daughter-in-law was teasing her mother-in-laws? What in the world was this? Oi, 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 if you have something to say, then spit it out. Don't go around touching everyone. Also, wipe that drool from your face. Ling Han said. Chen Xuan hurriedly raised a hand to wipe the drool from the corner of her mouth. With a yelp, she then said, "Ah. I almost forgot about the proper matters." Ling Han and the others couldn't help but sigh. This girl was truly a simple-minded one. She had been completely engrossed by the beautiful women around Ling Han. What proper matter? Ling Han asked with a smile. He naturally wouldn't be impatient with his daughter-in-law. His temper was as good as could be. Junior brother Ling has come across some dangers. Aren't you two distant relatives? Can you help him? Chen Shuang asked. Tang. A burst of killing intent instantly welled up in Ling Han's heart. Who dared to target his son? Helian Xuan was more so filled with worry as she grabbed Chen Shuang's hands, and asked, "What's happened to Jianxue?" Huh? Beautiful sister, you're familiar with junior brother Ling? Oh, you're all distant relatives. Chen Shuang said in curiosity. She was slightly dumbfounded at this moment. How did junior brother Ling have so many distant relatives? Moreover, they were all extremely beautiful women. Ling Han instantly felt the urge to beat someone up. Was this the time to be curious? He coughed, and asked, "What's happened to Jianxue?" Oh. Chen Shuang finally regained her senses, and she replied, "Junior brother Ling and I came out to train, and we discovered an ancient tomb nearby. We obtained a divine sword there, yet some people from the Dragon Universe Palace also discovered the ancient tomb. They forced us to hand the sword over, yet junior brother Ling refused to. In the end, we got into a fight." Chen Shuang continued, "In order to save me from an attack, junior brother Ling was struck and severely wounded. Not only that, but his wound is also laced with poison. The medicines on us are completely unable to deal with this poison. We wanted to leave, but the bastards from the Dragon Universe Palace wouldn't let us go. They continued to pursue us, all the way until here. Junior brother Ling's wounds became increasingly severe, so I came to this village with the intention of teleporting back to the sect and asking for help. However, I came across you guys. I'm afraid that junior brother Ling can't hold on for much longer. You guys are extremely powerful, so you can definitely help, right?" Ling Han lifted her up, and he had already broken into a sprint. Lead the way. This was his son, so he naturally wouldn't hold back anymore. Boom! He unleashed the full power from his body as he shot forward at an incredible speed. Meanwhile, he grabbed Hunyo and the others with his other hand, instantly leaving the small village. Chen Shuang was immediately overcome with a feeling of nausea. She felt like vomiting, yet she couldn't vomit no matter what. Only after Ling Han asked several times did she finally regain her composure and start to guide him. She was extremely stunned at this moment. Ling Han was far too quick, his speed far exceeded the limit of dividing soul tier cultivators. Do the people from the Dragon Universe Palace know that you're disciples of the Heavenly Saint Palace? Ling Han asked. Otherwise, how would a measly immortal palace tier force dare to provoke an 8th heaven celestial king tier force? To Ling Han's surprise, Chen Shuang nodded, and said, "They know. We revealed our identity at the start, yet they still continued to pressure us and try to kill us." Ling Han instantly came to a realization. That divine sword was definitely extremely valuable, so much so that those people had decided to kill all witnesses after snatching it. He had initially thought that this was only an ordinary divine sword that was a 5-star or 6-star pseudo-celestial tool. Now, however, he had reason to believe that it had reached 7, 8, 9, or even 10 stars. The more valuable the divine sword was, the greater the danger Ling Jianxue would be in. Ling Han's speed continued to increase as he unleashed the void space and drew on the power of time. To say nothing of dividing soul tier cultivators, his speed was top-notch even among immortal palace tier elites. Before long, they had already arrived in another small village. However, all of the people here were cultivators. Chapter 2170, Death. Damn it! The people from the Dragon Universe Palace have come over. Chen Shuang immediately exclaimed. Upon hearing this, a worried expression instantly spread across Helian Xuan's face. Ling Han observed the surroundings with his divine sense. With a shake of his head, he said, "Don't worry, they haven't found Ling Jianxue yet. The cultivators were searching the houses in the village one by one, and this was proof that they still hadn't found Ling Jianxue yet. Helian Xuanxue felt slightly better, but she immediately looked at Ling Han, and said, "Hurry, we need to think of something." Ling Han nodded, and said, "I will." He let everyone down before turning to Chen Shuangshuang, and asking, "How do we contact Jianxue?" "There's no way to contact him right now." Chen Shuangshuang spread her hands, and said, "I promised junior brother Ling to meet him in the nearby forest in 3 days' time. If anyone else tries to meet up with him before this, he'll know that they're definitely imposters from the Dragon Universe Palace. In other words, even if I shout now, junior brother Ling will only treat it as a trap. He won't show himself." It was extremely easy for Celestials to change their external appearance, and it was only their aura that was hard to change. However, if Chen Shuangshuang simply shouted from the distance, it would be indeed impossible for Ling Jianxue to determine if it was truly her. They still needed to wait for 3 days? Ling Han suppressed his killing intent. In any case, he could observe everything happening in this small village with his divine sense. Thus, if the Dragon Universe Palace found Ling Jianxue, he could immediately charge forward and kill them, rescuing his son in the process. If they couldn't find his son, however, they would simply meet in the nearby forest in 3 days' time. With this in mind, Ling Han was finally able to calm himself down. However, his killing intent was still raging with no bounds. These people actually dared to hunt his son? They all deserved death. Ling Han wore a dark expression as he strode toward the village. The others followed behind him, and even the Empress wore an extremely cold expression. There was a murderous look in her eyes. These people dared to target members of the Ling clan? Death! When they entered the village, a young cultivator immediately leaped over to block them, saying, "This place has already been locked down. If you don't want to die, hurry up and piss off." This young cultivator was only at the Genesis tier, yet he wore an expression of extreme arrogance. When he saw the Empress and the others, an expression of greed and lust more so spread across his face. Ling Han didn't reply. Instead, he threw a simple punch. Boom! The young cultivator instantly exploded into a cloud of flesh and blood. 19th Young Master, the people in the surroundings yelped. Upon seeing this, they couldn't help but tremble. This young man was the 19th son of Sui Yuanliang, the palace leader of the Dragon Universe Palace. Sui Yuanliang was someone with many children, and he had a whopping 34 sons and daughters. To Celestials, this was an astonishing number of offspring. After all, the higher one's cultivation, the more introverted their essence would be. As a result, it would also be harder for them to create offspring. This was especially clear when looking at the Empress and the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden. After so many years, their bellies still had yet to show signs of swelling. It was abundantly clear just how difficult it was to have offspring. Anyhow, Sui Yuanliang wasn't someone who only cared about his own pleasure. He also adored all of his children, and when his 11th son had died during an adventure to an ancient site, he had killed all 9 of the accompanying disciples in a fit of rage. He was a brutal and merciless person. Now, the 19th Young Master had been killed before them. By failing to prevent this, it was easy to imagine just what kind of terrifying punishment they would face. Several of them screamed in terror as they turned around to flee. They completely forgot about searching for Ling Jianxue. They didn't want to die. In any case, they didn't have any family, so there was no one else they needed to worry about. That being the case, they naturally ran for their lives. Pu. However, there were several flashes of sword light, and the fleeing cultivators were instantly sliced into pieces. A middle-aged man walked out from amid the bloody sword light, a meter-long azure sword in hand. The sword was still dripping with blood. "Those who flee from battle face immediate execution," he said in a baleful voice. His eyes were fixed on Ling Han. Perhaps because of the fresh blood, or perhaps otherwise, his eyes were also tinted with a hint of blood red. This was a severing mundane tier Grand Elder. Moreover, he was at the third severance, and it was because of this that he was brimming with confidence. Ling Han was completely unfazed, and he simply threw another punch. Pang! There was no surprise as the man exploded into a cloud of flesh and blood. Ling Han didn't stop, and he continued to walk further into the village. A devastating aura suffused into the surroundings, bringing with it a raging killing intent. Whoosh! Several people shot over from the distance, and most of them were surprisingly dividing soul tier elites. This was a 3-star force, so they naturally weren't short on dividing soul tier elites. In fact, the Dragon Universe Palace was an extremely powerful 3-star force. Not only did they have Immortal Palace tier elites, but Palace leader Sui Yuanliang was even a 5th secret elite. Under his command were dozens of other Immortal Palace tier elites. "Who are you?" a Een Soul elite roared. Ling Han glanced over. Whoosh! A burst of sword light shot out from his eyes, instantly slicing the person into two. Pooh! Blood violently sprayed through the air. The members of the Dragon Universe Palace were all deeply astonished. The Een Soul elite had failed to block a single strike from Ling Han. More precisely, he had failed to block a single glare. Ling Han continued forward. Right now, he wasn't in the mood to speak. He was in the mood to kill. Halt! Someone else jumped forward and roared. This time, it was a Heaven Soul elite. From Ling Han's previous attack, they had determined his cultivation level. He was at the Heaven Soul. Thus, Heaven Soul elites were naturally powerful enough to rival him. How audacious! You actually dared to kill disciples of the Dragon Universe Palace. You deserve death. Pooh! Ling Han threw another punch, and the Heaven Soul elite instantly transformed into a cloud of flesh and blood. What? At this moment, everyone was transfixed with shock. Weren't they both at the Heaven Soul? Why was the gulf between them so great? He's definitely a king tier from a large sect. It's because of this that he's invincible at the same cultivation level. Perhaps he's a disciple of the Heavenly Saint Palace. Don't tell me they hurried over after learning about this? Impossible. If they truly found out about this, they definitely wouldn't send just a few measly disciples. Kill them. Don't let a single one of them escape. Kill all of them. The members of the Dragon Universe Palace communicated with their divine sense, and they quickly turned their attention back to Ling Han and the others. There was killing intent burning in their eyes. What a wanton brat. You think you can act with domineering audacity just because our palace leader isn't here, an Immortal Palace tier elite said as he stepped forward. His hands were clasped behind his back, and he appeared as confident as could be. His confidence was indeed warranted. He was at the Immortal Palace tier, so he could easily crush those at the Dividing Soul tier. What did he need to worry about? Ling Han glanced at him. First secret? Die. He threw another punch, this time at the Immortal Palace tier elite. Naive brat, the Immortal Palace tier elite roared in fury. This measly Dividing Soul tier cultivator actually dared to attack him? Just how audacious was he? He also replied with a punch. Ling Han's punch transformed into a vicious tiger that bounded toward the Immortal Palace tier elite. Pang! His opponent's punch was instantly shattered. To the Immortal Palace tier elite's disbelief, the vicious tiger lunged at him with no obstruction. He immediately made a pushing motion, yet the flesh and blood on his hands and arms were immediately shredded, revealing his white bone. Then, even his bones started to shatter, reduced to nothing but ashes. However, the punch didn't stop there, and it continued to surge forth, obliterating the body of the Immortal Palace tier elite. He was reduced to nothing but bones, which were then also shattered into nothingness. This was an Immortal Palace tier elite, yet he was killed just like that. Not even a shred of him remained. A deathly silence descended over the village. A Dividing Soul tier cultivator has slain an Immortal Palace tier elite. A Dividing Soul tier cultivator has slain an Immortal Palace tier elite. A Dividing Soul tier cultivator has slain an Immortal Palace tier elite. These words reverberated in everyone's mind, causing them to forget everything else. Chapter 2171, Heaven-defying Power. Ling Han retracted his fist. As if nothing had happened, he continued to walk forward. At this moment, no one from the Dragon Universe Palace dared to block him. They were still transfixed with extreme shock and disbelief. They were completely unable to come to their senses. A Dividing Soul tier cultivator had killed an Immortal Palace tier elite? In a single strike, no less? Fuck. Only when Ling Han had taken almost 20 steps did the members of the Dragon Universe Palace finally come to their senses. Yet again, another elite stepped forward to block Ling Han. This time, it was a third secret elite. Since a first secret elite had been killed with a single strike, sending a second secret elite out most likely wouldn't yield a good result either. Thus, it was safer for a third secret elite to step forward. Moreover, the most powerful Dragon Universe Palace elite here was only at the third secret. If he didn't step forward, who else would? He was called Xiaofan, and he was an experienced Immortal Palace tier elite. He had already been at this cultivation level for over 700 billion years. He had initially been a lone cultivator before being recruited by Sui Yuanliang, and he was now the third palace leader of the Dragon Universe Palace. The palace leader was naturally Sui Yuanliang, and the second palace leader was Tang Tao, a fourth secret elite. Identify yourself. Xiaofan roared. Ling Han's power was far too heaven-defying, so he had no option but to take this opponent seriously. He didn't dare to view Ling Han as a Dividing Soul tier cultivator, even though the latter was indeed a Dividing Soul tier cultivator. Ling Han peered at him before throwing another punch. Boom! This punch was just as powerful and domineering as before. With a roar, Xiaofan unsheathed a green broadsword, and slashed down at Ling Han's punch. Pung! A burst of sword light slammed into the fist. Boom! A brilliant light instantly erupted. Xiaofan maintained his slashing posture, yet his body was forcefully pushed back by the domineering force of Ling Han's punch. His feet carved 2 deep trenches into the ground. He was pushed back 2.5 kilometers, and he only ground to a halt after almost reaching the other side of the small village. His hands trembled violently, and he could barely maintain his grip on his broadsword. The members of the Dragon Universe Palace faltered for a moment before erupting into rapturous and deafening cheers. An elite who could block Ling Han had finally appeared. Phew! They all heaved a sigh of relief. They had almost been convinced that Ling Han could boundlessly defy the heavens and slay anyone at the Immortal Palace tier. Wah! Xiaofan suddenly vomited a large mouthful of blood. At the same time, his hands finally lost grip, causing his broadsword to clatter to the ground. His bloodied hands shook uncontrollably, and this was due to the formidable force of Ling Han's punch. This wasn't a great deal. However, the blood that he had vomited was truly terrifying. This was a mouthful of blood that was filled with shattered flesh. This was shattered flesh from his organs, which had been obliterated by the might of Ling Han's punch. Xiaofan couldn't control himself anymore, and he continued to vomit mouthful after mouthful of blood, all of which were filled with his shattered internal organs. It was as if he were about to expel all of his internal organs. He had only suffered such severe wounds because Ling Han had unleashed the regulation of slaughter. Moreover, he had unleashed this using the source power of heaven and earth. A blade of grass which had once been as ordinary as could be had managed to endure the previous generation's regulation of slaughter, thereafter becoming extraordinary. With a single shake, it could astound the heavens, shake the earth, and destroy the stars. Zhao Zhen was only an ordinary third severance elite, so how could he hope to rival this devastating might? After vomiting 100 mouthfuls of blood, Zhao Zhen violently lurched forward, collapsing to the ground. His aura vanished without a trace. He had died. He had also died. Even though Zhao Zhen had seemingly blocked Ling Han's punch, he had ultimately still fallen to this attack. Gasp! Killing a third secret elite with a single strike? Moreover, to achieve this as a measly Heaven Soul elite? How could they accept this? However, this was also Ling Han's limit. He was only able to insta-kill ordinary cultivators up to the third secret. If he wanted to insta-kill those at a higher cultivation level, he would need to unleash his trump card, the Great Clash of Source Powers. However, the members of the Dragon Universe Palace naturally didn't know this. Thus, they were filled with extreme shock and fear. Where was the limit of this Heaven Soul elite? Or perhaps he had no limit? Ling Han finally stopped, saying, Xuan, where did you two hide before? In a cellar in the Heart Willow estate, Chen Xuan hurriedly replied. Bring me over. All right. The members of the Dragon Universe Palace could only watch on as Ling Han and the others left. They didn't dare to block them at all. Even Zhao Zhen had been insta-killed, so what difference would it make even if they all charged over? That would simply be seeking death. The Heart Willow estate was the largest structure in the entire village. It belonged to the Wenren clan, which was a rich and powerful clan of the village. Of course, the most powerful member of this powerful clan was only at the Genesis tier. After entering the Heart Willow estate, they were immediately met with resistance from members of the Heart Willow estate. However, their resistance was futile. Ling Han wasn't heavy-handed toward them, and he simply unleashed his aura, causing them to all collapse to the ground. We hid inside the cellar the entire time, and no one discovered us, Chen Xuan said with a proud expression. This was only natural. They were both at the fourth severance, so if they were intent on concealing themselves, how could the people in the Heart Willow estate discover them? They arrived at the hiding location, yet the door to the cellar was already open. There was no one inside. Ling Han had already anticipated this. The Dragon Universe Palace had been searching the entire village, so Ling Jianxue naturally had had to change his hiding location. Otherwise, he would have been found sooner or later. Ling Han planned to use the regulations of time to replay the events of the past. It would be helpful to receive even the slightest bit of information. He channeled the source power of time, replaying the scenes from the past. A young man materialized before them, and it was as if he were genuinely standing before them. This was none other than Ling Jianxue. Ling Han involuntarily reached forward, yet his hand directly passed through Ling Jianxue's body. This was only natural as this was no more than a projection of the past. This young man's appearance was slightly similar to Ling Han's, but it was even more similar to Helian Xuanxue's. He was lying on the ground, and it was clear that he was in a sorry state. The image didn't change much until a young man suddenly entered the cellar. A solemn expression spread across Ling Jianxue's face, and he immediately leaped up to attack. The young man retreated, yet he was no match for Ling Jianxue, being captured in a single exchange. Ling Jianxue turned around and dashed out of the cellar, disappearing into the distance. Huh? Who is this person? Ling Han's divine sense was all-encompassing, and with a single wave of his hand, his origin power transformed into a hand that dragged all members of the Wenren clan over. Who's going to tell me? Who is this person? Ling Han paused the image, leaving it at the moment that the young man appeared. Lord, this is Wenren Yu, a disciple of the main branch, a middle-aged man replied. Lord, hasn't the palace leader of your esteemed sect already gone to pursue that wretched brat with our senior elder?" an elder said as he looked at Ling Han. Ling Han frowned upon hearing this. "What's going on? Explain more clearly." Elsewhere, in a dense forest outside the small village, Ling Jianxue and Wenren hid behind a tree that had already withered long ago. They held their breaths as there were people scouring around not far away. "Why are you helping me?" Ling Jianxue asked using his divine sense. If it weren't for Wenren's warning, he definitely wouldn't have been able to escape in time. He would have been trapped in the Wenren clan, and at this moment, he would have already been captured or killed. "Because I need your help," Wenren replied with his divine sense. He was at the mountain river tier, so communicating with his divine sense was naturally not a problem. Ling Jianxue was slightly astonished, and he asked, "In my current state, what can I possibly help you with?" "I need your support so I can help my younger brother become the clan leader," Wenren replied. Ling Jianxue faltered upon hearing this. However, he immediately came to a realization, and he said, "You know my true identity." "Indeed, I eavesdropped on a conversation between members of the Dragon Universe Palace, and I discovered that you're a disciple of the Heavenly Saint Palace," Wenren said. He didn't keep this a secret. Chapter 2172, You're Dreaming. Wenren's grandfather had been the previous clan leader of the Wenren clan. He had initially wanted to pass this position to his son, yet his son had unfortunately passed away in an accident during his adventures. He only left two sons, Wenren and Wenren Xuan. At that time, Wenren and his brother had still been infants. Wenren had been slightly older, but he had still only been 2 years old. Meanwhile, Wenren Xuan had only just been born. Initially, if Wenren's grandfather had remained healthy and alive, the transition of the clan leadership would have been smooth and successful. However, that old geezer had been an adventurous person, and he had ventured deep into mountains by himself to hunt a powerful beast. In the end, he paid with his life. His death caused the main branch of the clan to become extremely weak, and the side branches of the clan seized this opportunity to snatch power. Wenren and his brother were ultimately still the legitimate successors in name, and there were also some old officials who continued to support them. However, with the passing of time, the side branches gained more and more power. At the same time, more and more of the old officials were also eliminated. This side branch was represented by none other than Wenren, the senior elder of the clan. Moreover, they controlled over 70% of the clan's finances. Money was naturally the most important thing to running a clan, so after taking control of the clan's finances, Wenren's next step was naturally to eliminate Wenren and his brother. That way, the main branch would have no more successors. At that time, the side branch could naturally assume power. After all, the clan couldn't fall apart because there were no successors from the main branch, could it? Wenren was 769 years old now, and he and his brother had already experienced no fewer than 500 accidents. They would experience an accident almost once a year, and if it weren't for the help from the group of elders who were loyal to the main branch, they would have already died a long time ago. However, as Wenren became increasingly powerful, the situation of Wenren and his brother also became direr and direr. Many elders realized that there was no chance for these brothers to turn the tables again, so they abandoned any remaining thought of supporting the legitimate main branch. Thus, Wenren had no choice but to take a gamble this time. Otherwise, it wouldn't be long before he and his brother died in an accident. Ling Jianxue slowly nodded upon hearing this, saying, "If I manage to make it out alive, I'll definitely help you become the clan leader." "Not me, my brother," Wenren stressed. "Why don't you want to become the clan leader?" Ling Jianxue asked in curiosity. "Because I'm more interested in cultivation," Wenren replied. "I want to join the Heavenly Saint Palace." Ling Jianxue faltered slightly, and he said, "Your ambition is truly great. If Wenren stayed in his clan, he could only become the leader of a small village. If he entered a large sect such as the Heavenly Saint Palace, however, he could at least become a severing mundane tier cultivator. Compared to the measly Genesis tier limit of the Wenren clan, his achievements would be countless times greater. After all, how could a Genesis tier cultivator compare to a severing mundane tier cultivator? The gulf between them was limitless. Thus, Ling Jianxue remarked that Wenren ambition was truly great. Wenren remained silent, yet there was a bright glimmer in his eyes. There was also a hint of resolve. This time, he was running the risk of offending the Dragon Universe Palace. If he were caught by the Dragon Universe Palace, he and his brother would definitely be plunged into a perilous situation with no chance of escape. At that time, all of his ambitions would be void. This was called looking for riches amid great danger. Ling Jianxue nodded, and said, "I'll definitely repay you for saving my life. I can personally help your brother become the clan leader of the Wenren clan. As for you wanting to enter the Heavenly Saint Palace, that will be slightly more troublesome. I can only try my best, although becoming an external disciple shouldn't be too difficult." The Heavenly Saint Palace was an 8-heaven celestial king tier force, so there were countless people trying to do everything they could to enter. Even though Ling Jianxue had become a core disciple, he still only had the right to introduce others to become an external disciple. "That's fine," Wenren said with a nod. He was confident that he could rise above the others. The two of them ceased their divine sense conversation. This was because someone had neared them, so even communicating using their divine senses wasn't safe anymore. If they were too close to others, their conversation could still be heard. Fortunately, that person only looked around for a short moment before leaving. The two of them breathed a sigh of relief. "My brother and I always played hide-and-seek when we were young, so it was by coincidence that we discovered this tree," Wenren said with a slightly proud expression. "Even though this tree is withered, it's quite a mysterious tree in that it can obstruct the detection of others." An expression of realization spread across Ling Jianxue's face. No wonder the cultivators from the Dragon Universe Palace always ignored this tree, even though they had already scoured this area several times. Whoosh! 2 figures landed before them. One was an old man who was wearing a golden-purple crown, and one was a middle-aged man who was wearing a yellow dragon robe. The old man waved his hand, and another person instantly appeared on the ground. He had most likely been placed in a spatial god tool. "Right here?" the old man asked. "Lord, it's this tree," the person replied as he crawled up from the ground. His hair was white, and he raised his hand to point at the tree that Ling Jianxue and Wenren were hiding in. He was none other than Wenren Tang, the senior elder of the Wenren clan. Meanwhile, the old man with the purple golden crown was Sui Yuanliang, the palace leader of the Dragon Universe Palace. The man in the yellow dragon robe was Tang Tao, the second-place leader of the Dragon Universe Palace. Ling Jianxue and Wenren instantly became as pale as a sheet. They hadn't expected that their secretive hiding spot would actually be discovered. Wenren Tang chuckled coldly in his mind. He had also only discovered Ling Jianxue's and Chen Shuang's existence by chance. However, he knew that they were far more powerful than him. To say nothing of Chen Shuang, even the severely wounded Ling Jianxue could easily kill him with a single strike. Thus, he headed off to notify the Dragon Universe Palace in an attempt to curry favor with them. Unexpectedly, however, Wenren had interfered, and helped Ling Jianxue escape before they had arrived. As a result, he had almost been killed by Sui Yuanliang. They looked everywhere, yet they couldn't find Ling Jianxue no matter what. However, a spark came to his mind, and he suddenly thought of this place. A long time ago, he had also posed as a benevolent elder in an attempt to win the trust of the two brothers. He had wanted to obtain some secret techniques that would help him open some critical rare treasures of the clan. Moreover, he had indeed succeeded. At that time, he had also tailed the two brothers, and it was at that time that he discovered the mysterious nature of this tree. Of course, with his power, the two brothers naturally hadn't noticed anything out of the ordinary. It was also because of this that Wenren had the false belief that this place was definitely safe. In reality, however, this wasn't the case. Humph! Sui Yuanliang lashed out. Pa! With a single strike, the withered tree split apart. However, Ling Jianxue and Wenren were completely uninjured. This was naturally an easy feat for Immortal Palace tier elites. Brat, you really were hiding here. Sui Yuanliang said with a loud laugh. There was a menacing killing intent in his eyes, and he said, you actually dared to steal my cold moon light sun sword. You're truly seeking death. Otherwise, as the true disciple of an 8th heaven celestial king tier force, how would I dare to touch you? Upon hearing this, Wenren Tang almost collapsed to the ground in fright. What? Ling Jianxue is the true disciple of a celestial king tier force? I'm done for. If Ling Jianxue dies here, will a celestial king come to flatten the Wenren clan? He had indeed been scared *less. After all, how could a mighty celestial king lower themselves to the level of targeting a measly Genesis tier clan? Moreover, it was Sui Yuanliang he needed to be the wariest of at this moment. Since he was now aware of Ling Jianxue's identity, would Sui Yuanliang still let him leave alive? Now, hand over the cold moon light sun sword. If you do, I can grant you a quick death. Sui Yuanliang said in an arrogant voice. Ling Jianxue smiled and turned to Wenren, saying, by the looks of it, I can't keep my promise. Wenren was also extremely open-minded, and he said, in any case, I failed to help you escape, so this doesn't count as breaking a promise. The two of them exchanged a glance before breaking into loud laughter. It was as if death weren't about to befall them. Brat, do you not understand? Sui Yuanliang asked with a humph. He reached over to grab at Ling Jianxue, saying, forget about it, I'll retrieve it myself. A large hand swooped over, blotting out heaven and earth. Ling Jianxue gritted his teeth. Even if he only possessed the power of an ant, he would still resist with all his might. The words, give up, didn't exist in his vocabulary. Right at this moment, however, a burst of light suddenly shot toward Sui Yuanliang's large hand. You're dreaming. Chapter 2173, He's not your father, right? Boom! Like a crashing wave, a palm strike surged over, bringing with it a terrifying might that made it seem like the heavenly fury of a great emperor. When the palm strike arrived, Sui Yuanliang's large hand was immediately crushed into oblivion. A figure immediately appeared, landing before Ling Jianxue and Wenren. This person was none other than Ling Han. His face was filled with killing intent, and his regulation of slaughter had more so become material and tangible. This regulation swarmed around his body, and it was as if it could crush heaven and earth. Sui Yuanliang had initially been calm and uncaring. Although his attack had been blocked, he naturally didn't need to unleash his full power against a measly 4th severance cultivator. Thus, this attack had utilized less than 1/10,000th of his power. As such, it wasn't surprising that Ling Han had managed to block his strike. He could tell that Ling Han's battle prowess was only at the peak stage of the 4th secret, and it had yet to reach the 5th secret. However, when Ling Han appeared before him, he couldn't maintain his composure any longer. In fact, his jaw almost dropped to the floor. Heaven soul. Motherfucker. This person who possesses a 4th secret battle prowess is actually a heaven soul cultivator? How is this possible? A string of curses raced through Sui Yuanliang's mind, and he felt as if he were having a dream. Everything felt so unreal. How is it a heaven soul cultivator? How is this possible? The gulf between the dividing soul tier and the immortal palace tier was like the gulf between heaven and earth. Regardless of how prodigious one was, this wasn't a gulf that could be overcome. In reality, however, Ling Han had indeed blocked his strike. He possessed the battle prowess of a fourth secret elite. "Old bastard, you're seeking death." Ling Han roared with raging killing intent. With a stomp, he unleashed his regulations of lightning and regulations of time in unison, arriving before Sui Yuanliang in a flash. He then clenched his fists to attack. No matter how astonished and stunned Sui Yuanliang was, he naturally wouldn't allow Ling Han to attack him at will. He hurriedly raised his right hand to block Ling Han's attack. With his reflexes as a cultivator, he could unleash a terrifying power with this hurried strike even though he was shell-shocked. Pung! Their attacks collided, and his body only leaned back a slight amount. Meanwhile, Ling Han was directly sent flying. Sure enough, his opponent only possessed a battle prowess at the fourth secret. He was no match for him. Sui Yuanliang felt slightly more confident. At the very least, he possessed a definitive advantage in terms of battle prowess. However, he still couldn't overcome the unease in his mind. This was because Ling Han was far too freakish. As a measly heaven soul cultivator, he actually possessed a battle prowess at the fourth secret. In fact, his battle prowess could even reach the peak stage of the fourth secret. Just what in the world was this? How could there exist such a freak in this world? Activating his void space, Ling Han instantly flashed before Sui Yuanliang again. With a turn of his hand, a wave of boundless sword chi swept forth. This was the heaven-destroying 9 swords, a celestial king tier technique. Sui Yuanliang hurriedly moved to block this attack. He possessed an advantage in cultivation level, so he was able to easily block Ling Han's attack. However, he didn't relax in the slightest. Not only was Ling Han's battle prowess heaven-defying, but even his physique was utterly heaven-defying. Even though he was sent flying time and time again, he just couldn't be wounded no matter what. He continued to charge back and attack with vigor and might. This was extremely uncanny. Even though Sui Yuanliang's battle prowess was superior, he was surprisingly the one who was on the defensive. He had no option but to defend. Ling Han was far too quick, and his attacks were also far too furious. For each one of Sui Yuanliang's attacks, Ling Han could attack 5 times or even more. Sui Yuanliang was clearly more powerful, but because of this, he had no option but to defend. He was unable to launch a counterattack. His defenses were watertight, so he wouldn't face any life-threatening danger. When his shock finally subsided, what replaced it was a feeling of incandescent rage. He, a 5th secret elite, was actually being pummeled by a measly Heaven Soul Jr. Boom! Sui Yuanliang unleashed a powerful attack, with 8 columns of azure flames erupting from his body, and forming the 8 trigrams. Mythical mountain quaking fire, he roared. Numerous celestial symbols materialized, with each of them possessing a mystical ability. However, Ling Han was unfazed, and he directly soared through the flames as he threw another punch. He possessed a source power of fire, so as long as his opponent's battle prowess didn't surpass his too much, any fire element attack would be like blowing dust onto his body. It would be completely ineffective. Right now, he was as furious as could be. There was only a single thought running through his mind, and that was to pummel the bastard in front of him to death. This bastard actually wanted to kill his son. Boom! The 9 source powers of heaven and earth within him also started to seethe. As if feeling Ling Han's fury, they also unleashed the rage of heaven and earth. Sui Yuanliang couldn't help but feel shock and disbelief. His opponent was clearly a heaven soul cultivator, yet the aura that he unleashed was like that of a divine son, the son of heaven and earth. This was an aura that couldn't be sullied, this was an aura that could only be revered. Otherwise, he would become the enemy of heaven and earth and invite great calamity. Just who in the world is this person? If his opponent were a celestial king, then so be it. Celestial kings could control the heavenly Tao, so it wouldn't be a stretch to call them a divine son, the son of heaven and earth. However, a heaven soul cultivator? Just what kind of joke was this? Ling Han's fighting spirit continued to soar without limits. At this moment, he had already forgotten about source powers of heaven and earth, power of regulations, and so on. He simply swung his fists, yearning to unleash his uncontrollable fury. It wasn't only Sui Yuanliang who was shocked into a stupor. Tang Tao, Ling Jianxue, and Wenren Yu were also transfixed with shock. It was just that Wenren Yu was too weak, and his level was too low, so he only knew that Ling Han was incredibly strong. However, he didn't understand the astonishing implication of Ling Han's strength. Meanwhile, Tang Tao and Ling Jianxue were truly stunned into silence. Which one of them didn't know about the gulf between the dividing soul tier and the immortal palace tier? Moreover, Sui Yuanliang was a 5th secret elite, so he could easily crush even 4th secret elites. Yet, he was actually unable to defeat a measly dividing soul tier cultivator. Sui Yuanliang's battle prowess was seemingly superior, yet in reality, he was the one on the back foot and being pummeled. They could see this with their own eyes, yet they were still unable to fathom and believe it. The most astonished person was Ling Jianxue. He had been brought into the celestial realm at a young age, and he had spent few years even with his mother, Xuan, before being sent to the heavenly saint palace. Even so, he still had some memories of her. As for Ling Han, however, he had absolutely no impression. Thus, he naturally wouldn't think that the man who had suddenly leaped out in explosive fury out to save him was actually his father. Ling Jianxue's expression was extremely strange. Why is this freakish person helping me? Moreover, why is his expression as if his son has been beaten? Is this really necessary? He's not your father, right? Wenren Yu murmured. Because Ling Han was far too mighty, he also started to gradually relax. He started to believe that they could make it out of this dangerous situation alive. Thus, he was also in the mood to joke around. How is that possible? Ling Jianxue replied. He shook his head without hesitation. What a joke! His father was still in a small world, and even though 10,000 years had already passed, he had probably only just succeeded in opening the sky, and entering the ancient realm. It was hard to say whether he had even reached the mountain river tier. It wasn't that he was belittling his father. Rather, this was decided by Ling Han's environment. It would be useless regardless of how talented he was. Cultivation naturally couldn't be without resources. Actually, you really do share some similarities with him, Wenren Yu said. He had initially been joking, but upon closer observation of Ling Han, he became increasingly curious. Ling Jianxue shook his head, clearly refusing to believe this. Jianxue. Right at this moment, he suddenly heard a voice from behind him. Ling Jianxue's heart shuddered, and he replied without even turning around. Mother. Wenren Yu clapped his hands, and said, and you're still saying that he's not your dad? Even your mother has come, so can your father still be far away? Hu Niu and the other women arrived, and Xuan directly rushed over to her son. Ling Jianxue wanted to move, yet he suddenly coughed out a mouthful of blood. Junior brother Ling, don't push yourself. Chen Xuan said as she rushed over. With Xuan on the left and her on the right, they together helped Ling Jianxue up. Mother, why have you come? Ling Jianxue asked in curiosity. However, he was feeling even more anxious. In order to obtain that sword, the Dragon Universe Palace was willing to kill everyone in their way. Ling He? What did you call her? Mother? Chen Xuan was extremely simple-minded, and only at this moment did she suddenly notice this detail. Chapter 2174, Father. Wasn't she a distant relative? How did she suddenly become his mother? Upon seeing Chen Shuangshuang, Ling Jianxue became even more anxious, saying, "Senior sister, why haven't you returned to the sect? It's too dangerous here." "Fuck. You've forgotten about your mother after getting a wife?" After meeting her son, and with her husband to fight against the enemy, she was feeling much better than before, even though her anxiousness was yet to subside. At the very least, she was now in the mood to think about other things as well. She grabbed her son's ear, and said, "Good one, you're not even going to care about your mother now?" He. Ling Jianxue could only chuckle foolishly. "Exactly, you shouldn't be like that," Chen Shuangshuang said in concurrence. "You need to worry about your mother first." "Ah, damn it. Such a beautiful sister, but I have to refer to her as auntie in the future?" She wore an aggrieved expression. Mucking around with beautiful women was her greatest indulgence, yet there was actually a beautiful woman whom she couldn't refer to as sister now. This caused her to feel extremely aggrieved. Ling Jianxue also wore a gloomy expression. Why was this senior sister so airhead? Beside them, Wenren was able to understand everything, and an expression of realization spread across his face. "Hang on, who is this person? He's far too powerful." Chen Shuangshuang was extremely simple-minded, and she had already forgotten about the matters from just a moment ago. She pointed at Ling Han, and her expression was as if she had seen a ghost. A heaven soul cultivator was actually battling against a fifth secret elite? And he was even enjoying the upper hand, and pummeling the fifth secret elite? Even though he would be sent flying each time he was hit. However, so what if he was sent flying? He wouldn't suffer any injuries, and he would immediately charge back. He was just like a god of war. He was far too freakish. "I don't know either," Ling Jianxue murmured in reply. "Pa." Helian Xuanxue lightly smacked her son's head, chiding, "That's your father." "Pooh." Ling Jianxue and Chen Shuangshuang spluttered and choked in unison. "Ha. Am I father?" Ling Jianxue asked in astonishment. "Isn't father still trying to open the sky in the small world? Just how prodigious is your father? He arrived at the celestial realm a long time ago, and it was only because the celestial realm was too large that he spent 10,000 years to find us," Helian Xuanxue said with a proud expression. She harbored great reverence toward Ling Han. Ling Jianxue couldn't help but grimace. As a prodigy, he was a relatively proud person. He had once dreamed about entering the small world to help his father open the sky when he became powerful enough. Or perhaps he would leave an abundant amount of cultivation resources in the ancient realm for his father when he finally managed to open the sky, helping him soar to greater heights. Even though there were explicit rules in the celestial realm forbidding people from bringing any living things back from the ancient realm or small worlds, powerful sects could still enjoy a slight exception. They could occasionally bring a few people to the celestial realm, and no one would bat an eye. Of course, they could legitimately only do this very occasionally. Otherwise, the ninth heaven celestial king tier forces would all gang up to attack them. Regardless of how powerful they were, they wouldn't be able to escape the fate of destruction. In Ling Jianxue's mind, he had only started cultivating a few dozen years later than Ling Han. However, the environment that they were in was completely different. He could receive more cultivation resources than Ling Han even dared to dream of. As such, he should have instantly surpassed Ling Han's cultivation level, and left his father far behind him. However, the reality was starkly different. Not only was Ling Han's cultivation superior to his, but even his battle prowess was as mighty and domineering as the heavens. He was at the heaven soul, yet he could rival fifth secret elites. Good heavens! This is my father? Your father is truly powerful. Chen Shuangshuang murmured. She had been given a fright by Ling Han before, and now she was given another fright. Fifth secret, Ling Han's limit was actually rivaling a fifth secret elite. I know, Ling Jianxue replied in a daze. Even now, he was still unable to fathom that a dividing soul tier cultivator could actually be this freakish. Moreover, this unbelievably freakish person was actually his father. Tang Tao looked over, and there was slight hesitation in his eyes. He was pondering whether he should target Ling Jianxue and the others or not. Initially, this wouldn't have been a problem. They were only juniors at the dividing soul tier and severing mundane tier, so as a fourth secret elite, he could have easily captured them with a single wave of his hand. Now, however, he was apprehensive of Ling Han. Could Sui Yuanliang defeat Ling Han? This was impossible. Even if Ling Han was unable to suppress Sui Yuanliang, if he wanted to leave, who could stop him? Moreover, once Ling Han left, news of them hunting disciples of the Heavenly Saint Palace would definitely get out. When a celestial king was enraged, even heaven and earth would change color. Right now, they were facing an eighth heaven celestial king. The Dragon Universe Palace was definitely done for. That being the case, why would he still stay in the Dragon Universe Palace? Even though he was the second palace leader, in reality, his relationship with Sui Yuanliang was only one of partnership and mutual utilization. How could he die for Sui Yuanliang? With this in mind, he immediately made a decision. He directly turned around to leave, as carefree and casual as could be. Tang! Tao! Sui Yuanliang roared in rage. However, Tang Tao didn't as much as pause, instantly disappearing into the dense forest, and vanishing without a trace. He only knew that Sui Yuanliang viewed the cold moonlight sun sword with great importance. However, as for its explicit use, Sui Yuanliang hadn't revealed even the slightest bit of information. Yet, he still wanted him to fight with his life? What a joke! Meanwhile, Ling Jianxue, Chen Xuan, and Wenren went numb in the head when they saw this. They knew that Tang Tao had fled because of Ling Han. That was a fourth secret elite. Elsewhere, Wenren Tang was trembling in fear. He discovered that he had ridden on the wrong coattail. Heavens! Not only was Ling Jianxue the disciple of an eighth heaven celestial king tier force, but he was more so the son of that freakishly powerful person. And to think that Wenren Tang had actually sold out Ling Jianxue? Could he still live? Wenren Tang collapsed to the ground, and he felt his ambitions for power slowly draining away from him. Right now, he only wanted to live a calm and peaceful life. Immediately after Tang Tao left, many other members of the Dragon Universe Palace hurried over. Palace leader, the 19th young master, was killed by this person. Elder Cheng was also killed. The third palace leader was also killed. They reported these pieces of news one by one, all of them incriminating Ling Han. Sui Yuanliang was also angered upon hearing this. I haven't even killed your son yet you've already killed my son and the third palace leader? And you're acting as if you're the victim? Brat, I'm going to destroy you, he howled. With a wave of his right hand, he retrieved a damaged piece of paper. This was a burnt piece of paper, and only less than half of it remained. However, once it appeared, it radiated with an overwhelming might that could suppress the heavens. It was like a celestial king tier decree that could command the heavens. Suppress him! Sui Yuanliang roared, an expression of reluctance on his face. He had obtained this decree by luck, and it was more so a damaged decree. Once it was used, it was very likely that it couldn't be used again. However, if he didn't kill Ling Han, it would be impossible for him to keep secret his actions of hunting the disciples of the Heavenly Saint Palace. At that time, when the Dragon Universe Palace was destroyed, he would also be killed. Thus, what use would this treasure be, regardless of how powerful it was? In any case, he was dead set on obtaining the cold moonlight sun sword. Meanwhile, Ling Han had reached a key barrier. Under the influence of his rage, he had forgotten everything, and only had thoughts of battle. This state had allowed him to gradually cultivate a fist technique. This couldn't be regarded as a secret technique per se, as it was only a form of willpower and aura. Regardless of what obstacles lay ahead, he would obliterate them all with his fist. However, Ling Han had a nagging feeling that he was still missing something that would unleash the true might of this fist technique. Only when the piece of damaged paper appeared did a cold chill suddenly run down his spine, causing him to come to a sudden realization. He was missing the threatening pressure of life and death. His physique was far too powerful. This was a good thing, but because he didn't need to worry about life and death, it meant that he couldn't appreciate the pressure and intensity of battle. When these feelings finally arose, he instantly attained enlightenment. Boom! He threw a punch, causing violent flames to billow through the air. Chapter 2175, Betrayal of the Decree. Pung! Meanwhile, Sui Yuanliang was still activating the piece of damaged paper. This piece of damaged paper was far too high in level, so it was crucial for him to be extremely careful. Otherwise, he might even suppress himself. However, Ling Han's punch brought with it an invincible willpower. This punch was far too terrifying, and he felt as if it were impossible to block and evade. In the next instant, the punch landed, striking his lower abdomen, and causing him to instantly curl over in pain. He felt as if he were about to vomit all of his internal organs, and his activation of his secret technique was immediately stopped. He was absolutely astounded. In reality, the might of this punch wasn't that powerful at all. However, the willpower that was imbued within it was far too powerful, so much so that it was surprisingly able to suppress his divine sense. He was unable to muster any thought of resistance. If it weren't for his strong desire to live, allowing him to forcefully activate a barrier of defenses, he would have perhaps been killed by that punch. He was only a measly dividing soul tier cultivator, so why did he possess such powerful willpower? It was as if he represented the heavens. Sui Yuanliang naturally didn't know that Ling Han possessed 9 source powers of heaven and earth, all of which had been utilized in this punch. Those were source powers of heaven and earth. These were matters at the Celestial King tier, so they could naturally suppress those at the Immortal Palace tier. Ling Han suddenly let out a loud laugh. Unleashing this punch made him experience a great sense of satisfaction. This was a fist technique that he had created, and it was also the Tao that suited him the most. Even though the might of this fist technique wasn't especially great at this moment, it was, after all, a technique that had yet to be perfected. Moreover, his cultivation level was also too low, so there was still much room for refinement and improvement. Indeed, the might of this fist technique was inferior to that of the Great Clash of Source Powers, but its advantage was that it could be easily controlled. This was unlike the Great Clash of Source Powers, which Ling Han could only unleash. After unleashing it, however, it would completely break free from his control. Uncontrollable powers were especially dangerous, even to their owners. Only the Tao that belongs to me can become the most powerful fist technique. I'll call this, the Fists of Fury. With a roar, Ling Han unleashed an endless flurry of punches, all of which were unleashed through the Fists of Fury. They could attack one's mind, punish one's body, and destroy all matter. At this moment, he attained enlightenment. When this fist technique was perfected, its might would definitely be no weaker than that of the Great Clash of Source Powers. Moreover, once he reached the Celestial King tier, the Great Clash of Source Powers would be limited by the might of the source powers of heaven and earth. However, the Fists of Fury would be different. They would only be limited by his cultivation level. The more powerful he became, the more powerful the Fists of Fury would become. Die! He swung his fists, and because his raw power had already reached the ascending origin tier, his fists were able to punch at an astonishing speed. Even Sui Yuanliang was unable to block them all in time. He felt as if his vision was drowned out by flying fists. Pung, 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 pung. Ling Han's fists of fury smashed down like rain, forcing Sui Yuanliang to retreat time and time again. Sui Yuanliang's blood churned, and he felt as miserable and pained as could be. He was beside himself with shock. Ling Han had clearly only possessed a battle prowess at the peak stage of the fourth secret, yet he had suddenly soared to a new height, with his battle prowess reaching the fifth secret. Ling Han now genuinely possessed the ability to threaten his life. Is this brat on drugs? No, 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 he's been on drugs this entire time. Otherwise, how can a measly heaven soul cultivator rival a fifth secret elite? It was just that he was too drugged up right now, so much so that even a fifth secret elite such as Sui Yuanliang was facing life-threatening danger. You dare to hunt my son? You're seeking death. Not only had Ling Han's fury not subsided, but it had become even more intense. Ling Han had always felt slightly apologetic to Ling Jianxue. He felt like he hadn't been able to accompany and raise his son, making him an irresponsible father. Just when he was about to find his son to make up for this, he discovered that someone was actually trying to kill the latter. Moreover, they had almost succeeded. How could Ling Han not be furious? I'll kill you, bastard, he roared in rage. Sui Yuanliang felt extremely aggrieved. Your son is only severely wounded and poisoned. But what about me? My son has genuinely been killed. Whom can I complain to? However, Ling Han was far too powerful enough to make him shiver in fear. Thus, his fighting spirit naturally receded like a falling tide. Friend, since your son isn't in any danger, why don't we shake hands and make peace? I'm willing to compensate you. When Sui Yuanliang said this, there was a burning sensation on his face. He wanted to dig himself a hole to hide in. This was far too humiliating. His treasure had been stolen and his son had been killed, yet he was actively asking for peace. Moreover, he was even offering to compensate his opponent. This was unfathomable. No need. Ling Han said in a cold voice, rejecting his offer. This person wanted to kill his son, so could he let this slide with some mere compensation? If Sui Yuanliang genuinely wanted to compensate him, he could compensate with his worthless life. Friend, don't take things too far. Otherwise, the only result will be a lose-lose situation. In fact, it might even lead to mutual death. Sui Yuanliang howled. Only you will die. Ling Han said, his fists not slowing down one iota. Sui Yuanliang roared in fury, yet he was struck time and time again, which caused his flesh to fracture and split. His aura also fell significantly. A resolute expression flashed across his eyes. If this continued, he might genuinely be pummeled to death by Ling Han. How detestable. He clearly possessed a powerful decree, one which could suppress any immortal palace tier elite once it was activated. However, under Ling Han's furious and unrelenting attacks, he was unable to find any time to unleash this trump card. Fine, since you're forcing me, I'll let you taste the evil fruits of your decision. Sui Yuanliang finally decided to go all out. His body shuddered violently, unleashing orbs of black air that appeared indescribably sinister. Ling Han had already been filled with killing intent, and this sight only made him even more enraged. You actually defected to the force of darkness? You truly deserve death. This sinister aura was none other than the unique characteristic of the other cultivation system. It was something that neither heaven nor earth could tolerate. Naive brat, what do you understand? Sui Yuanliang sneered. Those who win are righteous, and those who lose are wrong. This world is destined to be conquered, and only the revered deities can remain undying. Moreover, the deities will bestow us with true immortality. This heaven and earth possesses immortals' tribulation, but if the deities gain control, they'll erase this immortals' tribulation. At that time, everyone can enjoy immortality. You stupid fool, the heavenly Tao is the true killer. He spoke with conviction and righteousness, and it was clear that these beliefs were already deeply ingrained in his mind. He had been completely brainwashed by the force of darkness. Then I'll kill you in the name of this heaven and earth. Ling Han said with a humph. Before his son, these matters were all of lesser importance. What did it matter if the man practiced the cultivation system of darkness or whatnot? Since he dared to hunt his son, Ling Han would kill him no matter what. In a fit of chaotic rage, Ling Han unleashed his full battle prowess. However, after unleashing the power of darkness, Sui Yuanliang also became significantly more powerful. This was even though he was now detested by heaven and earth, meaning that he was unable to wield the power of regulations. However, this didn't weaken his battle prowess in the slightest. This was reflected by his astonishing recovery ability, and it was as if he possessed an indestructible physique. He instantly regained equal footing with Ling Han. Ha ha ha, I'll send you on your way. Sui Yuanliang said with laughter. His entire body was enveloped in black mist, and he started to activate the Celestial King Tier decree in his hand. Even though it was damaged, it was still powerful enough to kill any immortal palace tier elite. Ling Han only possessed a battle prowess at the 4th secret to 5th secret, so he was naturally unable to rival the power of this decree. Wang! The piece of damaged paper lit up, unleashing a devastating aura. This was the mighty power of a celestial king. Brat, die! Sui Yuanliang shook the decree, and he was just about to unleash the celestial king power to smash Ling Han into smithereens. Whoosh! A ray of light burst forth from the decree, yet right after soaring out, it made an unfathomable turn, and slashed back toward Sui Yuanliang. What? Sui Yuanliang coughed a mouthful of blood in shock. Why was the decree turning around to attack him instead? A ray of light flashed past, causing Sui Yuanliang to instantly stop all of his movements. He could only stare at Ling Han in a daze, and there was still an expression of disbelief frozen on his face. Why had the Celestial King Tier decree suddenly betrayed him? Fuck. Chapter 2176, Lady Wenren? Ling Han was confused at first, but he quickly came to a realization. After unleashing the power of darkness, Sui Yuanliang had already become the enemy of this heaven and earth. Meanwhile, the Celestial King Tier power had represented this heaven and earth, so after being activated, whom would it attack? In other words, Sui Yuanliang had been seeking death. You've inflicted this fate upon yourselves. Ling Han said with a shake of his head. He hadn't imagined that Sui Yuanliang would actually die by his own hands. Even he felt slightly dissatisfied by this conclusion. He lashed out without mercy, killing all of the remaining disciples from the Dragon Universe Palace. Father! Ling Jianxue called. He was slightly dazed as he gazed at his father, and his colorful imaginations of Ling Han naturally crumbled into ashes. Right now, he had to accept this mighty and powerful father. Ling Han dashed over, pulling his son into a tight embrace. Ling Jianxue was slightly flustered. He had never been embraced by a man before, especially a man he had just met. However, after a short while, he immediately felt the deep emotions of Ling Han's embrace. Tears involuntarily welled up in his eyes. Father, he called again. His voice was filled with emotion and admiration. Ever since he could remember things, he had never met Ling Han. His only impression of Ling Han was created through the descriptions given by Helian Xuanxue. He had once grumbled, he had once been confused, and he had once felt aggrieved. However, after beginning to cultivate, he had buried all of these emotions deep in his heart. At this moment, a feeling of familial affection finally erupted without restraint. Ling Han lightly patted Ling Jianxue's back. At the same time, he channeled the source power of wood, helping his son expel the poison from his body. This was naturally an easy task. Ling Jianxue had only been wounded by a dividing soul tier cultivator, so his wounds naturally wouldn't pose much challenge to Ling Han. Moreover, Ling Han could utilize his source powers of heaven and earth, so it wasn't long before he expelled all of the poison from his son's body, and healed all of his wounds. However, Ling Jianxue had suffered severe wounds, after all, so he wouldn't be able to fully recover in such a short period of time. "Let's go to my place first," Wenren said, interrupting at just the right moment. His suggestion naturally won everyone's approval. They all returned to the Wenren clan. As for Wenren Tang, no one paid any heed to him. They didn't even spare him as much as a glance. How could Ling Han, the Empress, and the others pay any heed to such a measly person? Meanwhile, Wenren felt it beneath him to deal with such matters. He had made the right move and taken the right gamble, and this had allowed him to instantly turn the tables. After arriving at the Wenren clan, Wenren arranged their living quarters. Meanwhile, the disciples of the Dragon Universe Palace were all captured by Ling Han. With him using his divine sense to observe the surroundings, these people were naturally unable to flee. Those who deserved death were killed, and those who deserved punishment had their cultivation crippled. Ling Han wasn't a bloodthirsty person. He understood how to act with reason. With their support, Wenren Xuan naturally inherited the position of clan leader without any problem. In fact, Ling Han even gifted him several alchemical pills, helping him directly reach the Genesis tier. However, this also came with a side effect. That was, Wenren Xuan was now stripped of any chance of improvement. He could only stay at the Genesis tier forever. To Wenren Xuan, however, this was already good enough. This was because with his cultivation talent, it had almost been impossible for him to reach the Genesis tier in the first place. Wenren was extremely intelligent, and he immediately organized an inheritance ceremony for his younger brother. At the same time, he invited Ling Han and the others to attend this ceremony. He believed that after doing this, the nearby forces most likely wouldn't dare to target the Wenren clan in the future. Because he was afraid of the Four Seas Palace, Ling Han put on some disguise. Otherwise, when he arrived at the Heavenly Saint Palace, perhaps the people from the Four Seas Palace would already be waiting for him there. Huh? Where's Wenren? The ceremony was about to begin, yet Wenren surprisingly had yet to arrive. Ling Jianxue couldn't help but find this strange. A mysterious smile spread across Wenren Xuan's face, and he said, "Brother Jianxue, you'll find out soon." How mysterious. What in the world are you playing at? Ling Jianxue murmured. He had been recuperating in the Black Tower for the past few days, which was equivalent to thousands of years in the Black Tower. Thus, he had naturally made a full recovery already. He had severed heaven and earth when advancing to the severing mundane tier, yet he had also ground to a halt after reaching the fourth severance. With Ling Han's abundant amount of cultivation resources, he now had hopes of reaching the fifth severance. At this moment, a beautiful woman walked over, and stopped behind Ling Jianxue. Ling Jianxue didn't pay any attention at first, yet the woman surprisingly didn't leave after stopping behind him. He found this especially strange, and he couldn't help but turn around, and ask, "Miss, why are you standing behind me?" The woman clasped her hands behind her back with a smile, and said, "Brother Jianxue, is this your attitude towards someone who shared adversity with you?" Huh? This voice is so familiar. Ling Jianxue was slightly dazed as he stared at her. After a moment, he suddenly exclaimed, "Why, you're Wenren." "It's Wenren, not Wenren," the woman said with a smile. "In the past, my brother was too young, and was unable to deal with clan matters, so the elders in the clan disguised me as a male so that I could support the hope of the main branch of the clan. After so long, I've almost forgotten that I'm a female as well." Ling Jianxue couldn't help but feel respect. For the sake of her brother and clan, this woman had made such a huge sacrifice. She was deserving of his respect. Lady Wenren, I'm impressed, he said with sincerity. Wenren Yu smiled, and said, call me by my name. I can also call you by your name, right? Indeed, Ling Jianxue replied. He didn't think much about this. Not far away, Ling Han and Helian Xuanxue were far more understanding of this exchange. This girl has feelings for Jianxue, Helian Xuanxue said with a slightly proud expression. Her son was well received by women, so she was naturally overjoyed as well. But doesn't Jianxue like Xuan? Now that another person has suddenly appeared, will it cause trouble? Zhu Xianer asked. They had all heard Ling Han talking about how Ling Jianxue was head over heels for Chen Xuan. Ling Han pondered for a moment before smilingly saying, it's no problem. Let the two of them grow closer, and this will also stimulate that girl. She's always so airhead, so isn't she delaying the fourth generation of the Ling clan? However, the Empress, Li Sikan, and the others didn't think that the airhead Chen Xuan would understand the situation. After all, hadn't the granddaughter of Celestial King Jiuhua pursued Ling Jianxue before as well? Why hadn't that girl shown any signs of jealousy? Perhaps she hadn't been stimulated enough? Ling Han pondered this. However, he didn't want to expose this in a forthright manner. Instead, he wanted Chen Xuan to discover this by herself. After Wenren Xuan became the clan leader, many people came to offer their congratulations. They all heard that the Dragon Universe Palace had been destroyed, and they naturally attributed this to elites from the Heavenly Saint Palace. Thus, they naturally didn't dare to underestimate the Wenren clan. This allowed the Wenren clan to feel extremely proud from top to bottom. Their new clan leader had only just ascended this position, and there were already so many powerful clans coming over to congratulate them. In the future, their development would naturally be smooth as well. Prosperity was just around the corner. After dealing with all the other matters, Ling Han waved his hand, and set off with everyone else for the Heavenly Saint Palace. Wenren Yu naturally set off with them as well. She had made a promise with Ling Jianxue, so she would also join the Heavenly Saint Palace, and become an external disciple. Father, this is the Cold Moon Light Sun sword, Ling Jianxue said as he retrieved a sword, handing it over to Ling Han. Ling Han accepted it, and held the sword hilt in his right hand. Meanwhile, he used his left hand to lightly stroke the blade of the sword. He was slightly curious. This was a sword that Sui Yuanliang had been intent on obtaining, even if that meant offending the Heavenly Saint Palace. Just what was so special about it? Wang. His hand stroked the blade, causing it to lightly shudder. It was as if the sword were murmuring. This sword is extraordinary. However, perhaps only Sui Yuanliang knew its history, Ling Han said. He retrieved Sui Yuanliang's spatial god tool, saying, let's look through his belongings. Perhaps we can find some information. Chapter 2177, Great Reversing Yin and Yang. Ling Han entered the Black Tower, where time flowed 100,000 times faster than in the outside world. In just a few hours of real time in the outside world, he had already examined all of the information left by Sui Yuanliang. Because Sui Yuanliang hadn't anticipated facing any dangers, he had indeed left a lot of clues in his spatial god tool. Great Reversing Celestial King. Great Reversing Yin and Yang Sword. Great Reversing Celestial Technique, Ling Han murmured to himself. When he opened his eyes again, he had already grasped all of Sui Yuanliang's knowledge. As it turns out, this is actually a 7-star pseudo-celestial tool and the secondary sword to the Great Reversing Yin and Yang Sword, Ling Han explained to his lovers and son. However, being a 7-star pseudo-celestial tool isn't the most impressive thing about this sword. Instead, one can use this sword to find the Great Reversing Yin and Yang Sword. Moreover, the the Great Reversing Yin and Yang Sword is a celestial tool, and even the Great Reversing Yin and Yang technique, the Great Reversing Celestial King's cultivation technique, is sealed inside this sword. What kind of existence was the Great Reversing Celestial King? The Empress asked. Both might be celestial kings, but how could a fifth heaven celestial king compare to a ninth heaven celestial king? Their standard was extremely high now, so those under the fifth heaven, sixth heaven, or even seventh heaven wouldn't be viewed very highly by them. Only those at the eighth heaven or ninth heaven could be regarded as freakish. Ling Han paused for a moment before saying, should probably start from the beginning. The Great Reversing Celestial King is someone with many stories. If one wants to become a celestial king, they definitely need to possess immense talent. After all, even king tiers are unable to become celestial kings. However, there are always exceptions in this world. During his earlier years, the Great Reversing Celestial King only possessed ordinary talent, and no one believed that he could reach the Severing Mundane tier. However, even though he stumbled and struggled, he still managed to ascend to the Severing Mundane tier. Afterward, no one believed that he could reach the fifth severance, yet after obtaining a rare treasure, he was able to complete this feat. In summary, he struggled through each cultivation level, but he was always able to come across great fortune, allowing him to reach perfection in each cultivation level. Those of the same generation as him were either far superior in cultivation level, or they died after failing to resist their immortal's tribulation. However, he was always able to just barely break through when the immortal's tribulation started to threaten his life. Interestingly, his bumpy path didn't stop him from becoming a celestial king. Moreover, he became a ninth heaven celestial king. In the beginning, the Great Reversing Celestial King wasn't prominent among the celestial kings. However, after creating the Great Reversing Cultivation Technique, he came from behind to surpass all others, becoming the ruler of heaven and earth in that generation. But Ling Han's expression suddenly became strange. But what? The others all asked in curiosity. But, the Great Reversing Celestial King eventually became a woman, Ling Han revealed. What do you mean? The others asked in confusion. The Great Reversing Celestial King had originally been a man, yet he always believed that he should have been a woman. However, even though celestials can transform their bodies, they're unable to genuinely reverse yin and yang. Yet, the Great Reversing Celestial Technique that he created could reverse yin and yang, ultimately allowing him to become a woman. He became a genuine woman, Ling Han said in a leisurely voice. Everyone was astonished. Something like this was possible? The Great Reversing Yin and Yang sword also possesses this ability. For those who are struck by this sword, men will become women, and women will become men. However, since they haven't genuinely practiced the Great Reversing Yin and Yang cultivation technique, this transformation will only last for a limited time, Ling Han said. So fun. So fun. Hu Niu said as she clapped her hands. Niu wants this sword. After hearing this story, it was clear that the Great Reversing Celestial King was genuinely an extremely interesting person. Heh. Ling Han tossed the cold moonlight sun sword to his son, saying, since you obtained this sword, it's up to you whether you obtain the Great Reversing Celestial King's cultivation technique and divine sword or not. Ling Jianxue accepted the sword, and placed it in his spatial god tool with a nod, saying, I'll decide when I have the chance. Using the transference portals, they then set off for the Heavenly Saint Palace. After arriving at Red Blossom Village, Ling Han drew all of his lovers into the Black Tower. He was going to become a student to learn that omnipresent technique, and his goal was extremely clear. Thus, it was better for his lovers to cultivate in the Black Tower. Because of this, only 4 people remained when they arrived before the Heavenly Saint Palace: Ling Han, Ling Jianxue, Chen Shuangshuang, and Wenren. From the foot of the mountain up, everything belonged to the Heavenly Saint Palace. Outsiders were strictly forbidden from entering, and there was a gigantic formation enveloping the entire sect. From the outside, one could only see a hazy mountain range that was hidden amid clouds and mists. Nothing could be seen clearly. If one possessed a token of the Heavenly Saint Palace, they could ignore this formation, and directly fly inside. If one tried to forcefully barge in without a token, they would be immediately crushed by the might of the formation. Of course, this was unless one was as powerful as a celestial king. Thus, if outsiders wanted to enter the Heavenly Saint Palace, they had to pass through the large gates at the foot of the mountain. There were people standing guard here, and only those who were granted permission could enter. Initially, Chen Xuan and Ling Jianxue could have entered without any problems. However, because there were two outsiders in Ling Han and Wenren, they didn't enter the sect directly. Instead, they went to the large gates together. Our respects to senior sister Chen and senior brother Ling. The four disciples guarding the gate bowed and spoke in greeting when they saw Chen Xuan and Ling Jianxue. All four of them were at the severing mundane tier. However, they were only at the first severance. Moreover, they were all far older than Chen Xuan and Ling Jianxue. They had reached the severing mundane tier earlier, but because they weren't talented, they were still unable to take that next step. Thus, they could only remain external disciples who guarded the gate. When they saw core disciples such as Chen Xuan and Ling Jianxue, they naturally had to pay their respects. What was important in the sect wasn't age. Rather, it was strength and talent. Ling Jianxue nodded in acknowledgement. He then pointed at Ling Han and Wenren, and said, "These two are potential talents that senior sister Chen and I discovered during our adventures. We especially brought them back to introduce to the sect, so help them get registered." Understood, the four external disciples said with a nod. There was indeed such a tradition in the sect. Whenever disciples went out to adventure and train, they would keep an eye out for cultivation talents to bring back and examine. If they passed the examinations, they would be accepted into the sect. If they didn't pass, however, they would naturally be sent back wherever they came from. In reality, most disciples had joined like this. In fact, some disciples had even been personally recruited by the elders and protectors of the sect. For example, there might be a cultivation ceremony in some place, and those who managed to shine would be recruited by all kinds of powerful sections. If they didn't send elders, protectors, or ascending origin tier elites and celestial kings, how could they possibly snatch these outstanding talents? After registering their information, Ling Han and Wenren were easily let through by the four external disciples. In any case, the following examinations wouldn't be their responsibility. They had already finished their job. Ling Han and the others entered the sect, only to see a winding, serpentine mountain path. On the sides of this path were dense bushes consisting of flowers and peculiar plants that were radiating with a divine glow. In the distance, there were also many pagodas and abodes that were faintly discernible. Sitting atop the mountain, it was as if they were hovering in the air. This was much like a celestial abode. Junior Sister Chen. Immediately upon entering, they saw a young man arriving on a sword. He was wearing an azure robe, and his appearance was relatively handsome. "Senior Brother Wang," Chen Xuan said in greeting. Meanwhile, Ling Jianxue seemed slightly displeased, and he pursed his lips as he also greeted Senior Brother Wang. Ling Han immediately understood the situation. This Senior Brother Wang was definitely his son's rival in love. Even though Ling Han had no animosity with this Senior Brother Wang, who told him to fight for his future daughter-in-law, he definitely had to help his son. Only at this moment did this Senior Brother Wang shoot a sideways glance at Ling Jianxue, saying, "Oh, so Junior Brother Ling is also here. I didn't know that you had already been released by Grand Elder Jiuhua." Heh. His act of provocation was as clear as could be. You're tuning into the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.